the lives of ordinary Barbadians. And so, this land acquisition, Mr. Speaker, sir, will seek to empower persons in a way that they can have a part of the Barbadian rock, where persons would have buried their navel strings, where they have an indigenous connection to the East. The city wise men come from the East, the three wise men. We have three wise politicians from the East too. And I am saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, that if you are talking about land acquisition, making land accessible for the poor people of this country in such a way that it would help to empower and improve their lives as it relates to housing solution, you cannot talk about land acquisition unless you talk about sustainable development. And one of the most important calls in sustainable development, Mr. Speaker, sir, is, of course, the planet and how we treat the planet. But of course, along with the planet and the land, there's another tenet: people. How do we incorporate people in the development of our landscape? We cannot talk about sustainable development in a serious and meaningful way unless we talk about people. So when we are talking about housing projects, we have to talk about housing projects and land acquisition in a way that it affects ordinary people. And how we can formulate projects that will encompass every aspect of their lives. The reason I say this, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that I believe that every single housing unit project should have a community park. I believe so. I believe that every single housing project should have a home for the elderly and a recreational area for the elderly. I believe if you are talking about sustainable development and people being an important cog in that development, you must be able to talk about the disabled community and how that every single housing project in this country must have facilities for the disabled. And as Minister of Youth, of course, I will expose the fact that every single housing project, if you're serious about people as part of a sustainable development plan, must have an area or a nursery or area for children. That is what sustainable development is about. So the term must never be used loosely, because at the end of the day, it affects person's lives. And of course, you can't forget partnerships. And how we must operate together in terms of partnerships, people, the planet, prosperity. Of course, that is another important tenet. Because persons must have a tangible stake in this Barbados that we live. So we will also vocalize on the fact that the rustic village, which offers a panoramic view of the East, any housing project, and I am appealing to the Minister of Housing, of course, that is involved in a community, I really feel that a percentage of those houses, a high percentage too, should be given for persons who live in the immediate area. Because communities must feel a sense of entitlement. They must feel a sense of entitlement. And that is the fairness across the board that I speak to today. So the people in St. Philip, and I wish the Member of Parliament, obviously, well, but the people of St. I can't certainly vocalize on her behalf, I will try. But the people of St. Philip must be able to have a tangible stake in this housing development. That is my point. And if we are serious about people and communities and building communities, we must be able to incorporate communities in every single plan that we make as a government. And I want to say that a community center, as the Minister of Community Empowerment, I would have lucid, probably pellucid, maybe limpid as well, discussions with the Minister of Housing, because I believe that every single community and housing development should also have a community center. Not to become an edifice, like what happened with the Water Authority building. That's not what this government is about. But become an active center where persons can go and express themselves in dance, theater, and educational components. That is what I'm talking about. And I believe that every single community and every housing project that is imagined in the brains of the persons who are responsible for them, that they must involve communities, community centers, facilities for the disabled, and the elderly, which I will speak until I get glutton-free about. The elderly, we must be able to care for the children in this society. And you can't have a housing project where you have high-rise buildings that the elderly and the disabled have to climb 20 and 30 steps up. There must be a sensible and sensitive approach to how we treat to our people. Again, I go back, as I said, to the most important tenet of sustainable development, people. And I want to congratulate, in the same voice, the Member of Parliament for Christchurch East, the Minister responsible for energy. Because, like my colleague from St. Lucie, and I want to congratulate him for the wonderful experience that he gave to Barbados in the gathering. It certainly really lent momentum, and I'm sure it will catapult another Member of Parliament for St. Peter in his quest to be just as good or better. They say that they always put a woman in front, and St. Lucie, the only female parish in Barbados, lay from the front. I see the women in this house smiling. We have a woman Prime Minister as well, and I'm happy today to be able to be led. They say if you want something, say you call upon a man. If you want something done, you call upon a woman. I hope the whole of Barbados is listening. If you want something said, you call upon a man. If you want something done, you call upon a woman. Mr. Speaker, I see you smiling as well. But I want to say that if you are serious about housing development, there's a new trust in Barbados as it relates to renewable energy, reduction of fossil fuel. You heard the Minister of Energy, you heard him repeatedly say that our carbon dioxide emission in this country and the burning of biodiesel is far too high. You heard it. And that's why he's saying, and I agree with the Member of Parliament for St. Lucie, when he says that any serious housing development has to take in account renewable energy, whether it is wind or solar. They must always so, because we live in a water-scarce country. Be conservative means, as it relates to water usage, the faucets that you use, water conservative faucets, the tanks that you put around, whether they're the tanks outside or the ones built in the basement area. But we must find every single way to circulate the water that we know as rainwater that runs off the roof and runs into the sea. That is the water we have to catch. Whether we use it for domestic purposes, whether we use it for potable purposes, it must be used and recycled in this country if we are serious about sustaining the development of Barbados. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am 150%, if that is possible. One thing you know that is impossible, that 20 is greater than 80. But if it is possible to get 150%, I am 150% behind the new drive of planting trees around Barbados. And I believe that every single community and housing project should have an area allocated for the planting of garden and trees. Community gardening and trees. The million trees that we will plant, and they say we will plant across Barbados over the next year, is responsible, Mr. Speaker, and I can repeat, is responsible for the extraction of 48 million pounds of carbon dioxide. and a significant reduction in the greenhouse gases, which will seek to destroy life as we know it. It is the biggest existential threat in the world. The ocean is rising 4 millimeters every single year. You know why? Because of the extra heat from the sun and the melting of the ice. It goes back to community gardening that we should be doing around our house and the planting of trees. Because if we do this in every single project, we are able to extract more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The sun is rising by 0.2 degrees Celsius every year. And in the next 40 or 50 years, trust me, the ocean will rise by 10 to 15 inches, which will destroy the ocean as we know it. And I see the Minister of Maritime Affairs looking. Because we must be able to mitigate our ocean and our sea and our beaches as we know it and the reefs as we know it. And I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, our housing development must take into account land, the way how our water courses run. Our engineering and geospatial technicians must understand how our water courses run when we develop houses so that the ocean and the sea as we know it will not be affected by the runoff of our water. I'm not only talking about the flooding, the local flooding, the surface water. I am talking about the runoff that will affect the beaches and the ocean as we know it. That's what we're talking about as well. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have, of course, a problem in Barbados every single time, and especially in the epicenter of Christchurch. And I will be first to put up my hand and say, I will defend it to the dying end. Once I have blood in my body, an air that is minus the carbon dioxide that I spoke about earlier, I will expose and vocalize on behalf of the good people from the epicenter of Christchurch, Christchurch West Central. And I, as minister and MP for the area, in my first 6-7 months, experienced 4 house fires. And we know the housing situation that we were faced with prior to 2008. We know the housing situation that we were faced with in 2008. The minister is moving with a pace to rectify that problem. And I want to congratulate him for that. He and his minister and his ministry, who are working beyond the hours allocated to ensure that this housing situation is rectified. That is what they're doing. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, that it's unfortunate that the last administration, over the last late years, could not have found the fortitude, the spirit, the love, care, and attention to these things and to people where they could have said, let me put in every housing project 6 or 7 or whatever number, because they know numbers better than me and you. The only person that I understand numbers is the fellow who said 20 greater than 80. But they know numbers, because they know to get manna drop out the sky and into the buckets. That is numbers, and that's magical numbers. But what I'm saying is that every single housing project should have, I know I am having the listening ear of both ministers, a set of houses allocated for disasters, whether it's a fire, whether it is a natural disaster from a hurricane, or whatever. You name it, Mr. Speaker. And some in your area too. There should be houses allocated that, because when a person is exposed to a tragedy or a travesty, as much sympathetic words as you can express to them, nothing beats security. Nothing beats their being able to feel protected and to be housed so that their life could be restarted and to have a semblance of normalcy. That's what they look for. And they look for immediacy. They want a quick fix now. They don't want to hear that you have to call this agency and call that agency and get your phone put down in their ears. So I am saying that every single house in new construction, land acquisition, should take in account that there are persons who will be suffering from natural disasters, and you have 5 or 6 units or houses allocated for them. That is what I'm saying. Because they experienced it firsthand. I would have loved to be able to tell the good people of Christ Church. Those unfortunate. Now, there's a keys here. Go and find comfort with you and your family, and that's where your safe place. That is what I would be like to do. But I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, the ministers will move with all the ATPA and their being to ensure that Barbadians can live the Barbadian dream. Or the Bajan dream, maybe it's raised speaking about Barbados. And when we call in the year of 2020, where we are asking every single Barbadian to have the visual acuity to focus on Barbados to help build this country. When we are asking every Barbadian to put their hand to the plow. In the same way, we as a government, we are saying that we are going to walk not in front, nor behind, but by the side of ordinary Barbadians, giving them the opportunities that they need. That's what we are saying. And we are saying that we are willing and ready, and we have shown it. We don't want to talk the talk. They had a song called "The Lord Don't Talk to Me Every Game and Nothing." We ain't talking the talk, Mr. Speaker. We are prepared to walk the walk and do the do for the good people of this country. That is what we are prepared to do. And this is what doing the do is. Bring serious resolutions to this honored August chamber. This is bringing serious resolutions to this chamber. All the last administration reminded us, you know that it was trip advisory. It tripled me and you and every Barbadian. That's all you had in this country. Trip advisory after trip advisory, telling persons from abroad not to come to Barbados. That's what we had as the new norm. It was a new Barbados over the last 10 years, a different Barbados, one that we are not accustomed to. That's what we had representing as a country. That's what we had. There was downgrade after downgrade. The member parliament for the West, it was a new grade of down in this country. That's what we had, masquerading as a government. And it never redounded to the ordinary Barbadian. Whether it's a housing project, whether it's a land project, whether it's a social intervention project, there was nothing for the ordinary folk in this country. So that is why we have moved. We're very connective sinew in our being to ensure that there will be a new Barbados. We are being led, of course, by none other than the Member of Parliament for St. Michael Northeast. And I'm happy that she has epitomized the words of Margaret Thatcher herself when she said, if you want something done, you call upon a lady. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise, of course, to support this resolution that is before this House. I want to commend the Speaker who spoke before me for an excellent contribution to the discussion. And of course, the Honourable Member for St. Andrew and the Honourable Member for St. John. Mr. Speaker, sir, I found myself in a somewhat pensive mood earlier as the Honourable Member for St. Michael East took me to the place of my birth and a little chattel house in my Lord Sill. And in that little chattel house in my Lord Sill, my mother gave birth to 8 children. I was the 7th. And I remember, sir, in that house, before it was fixed, you could see through the sideboards, so I would look to see when Mommy was coming home when I was being naughty. But I also remember, sir, that before I moved to the Pine where everybody associates me, I remember that I would have to, like everybody else who lived in my lord, so like many of us in that era, and certainly those before that era, that I would have to go into the yard to use the facilities. I know at night, like many of us would have to go out with a piece of paper that we would like to chase off the cockroaches and so on. And in order to be able to, to use those facilities. But I have never, sir, associated any of that, sir, or any person who was living that way, sir, or having to live that way in Barbados, in any way less dignity or less than a human, sir, because it's just circumstances. And circumstances change. And all of us of color, whether we like to accept it or not, none of us came here, sir, prosperous. Most of us, if not all of us, came here against our will, forced to do things that we were, sir, as human beings probably should not have had to do. The Honorable Prime Minister spoke, sir, of when she was in Ghana, of her experience where they took her to a place where they would hold people, black people, sir, into a holding cell. It wasn't really a cell, but it's very small space that they would force hundreds of people, sir, to gather, defecate on themselves, live in that space or die in that space and wait for the ship. That, sir, is dishonorable. But there is nothing dishonorable, sir, about having to live the way that some of us had to live. But it is dishonorable, sir, to have created a society of us and them, where there is a possibility for us to do better when circumstances have changed, because they said it's just circumstances. When circumstances have changed and people are being forced to live in conditions, sir, in a modern Barbados, sir, that do not have the fittings of a modern Barbados. And the reason that is, sir, is because we have a system where we believe some people should benefit from development and others should not. In my constituency, sir, in St. Michael South, I still have many people, sir, who have outhouses. In fact, sir, there are some houses that you go to, and from looking on the outside, you cannot tell. But then when you ask to use the bathroom, some people get uneasy. And some direct you freely to the back, or some say, Minister, if you will help me know because I would like to have facilities. Those are the things that we came office to change. And those are the things that we are changing. Sorry, listen to the Honorable Member for St. Lucie, sorry. The Honorable Member for St. Peter hasn't yet spoken, but I'm sure you will. But the Honorable Member for St. Lucie said this morning that you cannot drive on a promise. Sir, you cannot live on a promise. You cannot live on a promise, and we made some. And that is why, sir, from time to time you would hear me remark, sir, a promise made and a promise kept. Because we, sir, if we are serious about what it is we came to do, we must allow people to live out the full experience and manifestations of our words and those promises, so that people must not be living in housing, sir, that is below what we consider to be proper Barbadian standards. The last administration boasted time and time again that they had built affordable housing. Well, I don't know how it got affordable. Affordable for whom? Because very few Barbadians who needed to be able to afford it couldn't afford it. The people that could afford it didn't want it. And the people that wanted it could not afford it. As a matter of fact, sir, you would recall, all of us in here would, that many of those houses ended up costing more than they could even sell because of this kind of overrun mindset. Overruns for everything. Everything costing more than it should cost. So you build a house that should really cost $150,000, they end up costing $300,000 and still nobody in it. Or still is not connected to the sewage system, or you don't have the proper permissions to be able to build there or to allow people to live there. Madness! So what we had before in the last 10 years, sir, was a whole system of madness. And I am very grateful to see, sir, that the Honorable Member for St. Andrew is making wrong things right. And that we would set out, sir, on a housing program of genuine, affordable housing for poor people in this country. But I must say, sir, that affordable housing cannot mean cheap housing. Affordable does not mean cheap. So I would expect, sir, and I'm pretty sure, sir, that the Honorable Member for St. Andrew and St. John would ensure that when we are talking about affordable housing, we are still talking about good quality housing in terms of the design of the housing, if you're looking over it, in terms of the material that we use for the housing, sir, the different things that are inside of the house. We have to ensure, sir, that it is proper housing. As you probably do, I'm pretty sure you do, Mr. Speaker, sir, because we have the same constituency, basically. I go and I see some houses that Urban have built in the past. And you walk into these houses, sir, some of them a few years old. The kitchen falling apart, the flooring falling apart. It rains when it leaks when it rains. Sometimes when the sun shines, they get rays of sunshine coming through it, leaking sun. Some of these houses so badly constructed, sir. And those houses were not affordable, but they were built cheap. So affordable cannot mean cheap, because we have to make sure that poor people live in dignity in this country. And sir, I also believe that the quality of the roads. We have been talking, sir, as a government about some of the things that we must do. We have said for the longest time that we recognize the Honourable Member for Christchurch, you're West Central? The Honourable Member for Christchurch, West Central, said in relation to his contribution, sir, the climate is changing. We know that Barbados will face, at some point in time, hopefully not too soon, but a hurricane of greater strength than which we have faced in the last few years. It is going to happen at some point in time. I don't want to call it. But I do know that we have to build, recognizing that the potential is there that it could happen. Because if it's happening all around us, it's only a matter of time. Whether it is a category 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, sir, it is going to be something. We sometimes don't even get a category anything, and roofs blow off. The rain just fell the other day for about 10 minutes, and all of my constituency flood. But the Honourable Member for Christchurch West came, and to my rescue, I must say he was on the ball. But my constituency flood. So that if the rain falls, and if the wind blows, many houses in this country are exposed. As we build out, Mr. Speaker, sir, we cannot continue to build the kinds of houses that we had built because we're not facing the kinds of systems that we used to face. So even as we build affordable housing, we have to build housing, sir, that is resilient to pressures in the system that we may be able to face. Therefore, we have to have adequate drainage, sir. We have to make sure, sir, as we had discussed before in Cabinet, that when you build the houses, sir, you have all these things that allow the roof, I can't remember what you call them, but you lock the roof on so that when the wind gets up to a certain amount, sir, the roof doesn't blow off. We have to make sure as we build affordable housing, sir, we do not build cheap. And that is the point. The Honourable Member for St. Michael East, sir, made a point that I cannot let go unnoticed either. That there's a lot of liquidity in the banking system, liquidity grandmother in the banking system. $9 billion. Sir, and poor people can't get a loan to build a house, but they will lend you money to buy a car. You cannot get money to buy a house, but they won't lend you money to buy a car. And everybody knows a car is a deteriorating asset. And that we have to make sure, sir, that we speak to the banking system. So that when we build out, so because the truth is, at the end of the day, the government would never be in a position to build as many houses as people need. When I have my constituency clinics on Wednesdays, people ask me for two things primarily: jobs and housing. We would never be able to build all the houses, sir, but there's an active private sector that we have to empower to be able to build those houses, sir. And that we have to make sure poor people have access, middle-income people too, have access to the financing system, sir, so that they could build and pay for their own house. So you have people now, I believe, sir, given the liquidity in the banking system, and given the fact that there are other pressures now on people's salaries, so we have to look at the way we're talking about these mortgages, man, so that we give the average person an opportunity to live in this country, sir, in Barbados, sir. And housing is a necessity. I mean, when you're young, they tell you want food, clothing, and housing. I mean, we've known that for the longest time. But yet we've making it more and more difficult for people to be able to afford a house. More and more difficult for people to be able to live in this country. When I first started to work, Mr. Speaker, sir, there was a lady who worked with me who said to me at the time I was 21, she said to me, I'd taken a job at the VAT office, and when I started getting a little something, you know how it is, I wanted to go and buy a car. And in her wisdom, she said to me, why you don't go and buy some land? And I said, well, no, I want to buy a car. I don't want to be standing by the bus stop every day. She said, you need to build yourself a house. Because as you get older, that is the one thing, sir, that you will be, but she didn't call me, so I'm calling you, sir. So that is the one thing you'll be able to have that you can pass on to your children. You're going to regret it. I am advising those in this country who are in a position now, the young people, to make smart choices. Choose to buy land if you can. Choose to build a house if you can. But as a facilitating government, we have to make it easier for people to be able to afford it. The choice is much easier to make between a car and a house because you could afford a car and you just can't afford the house. And so we have to review that policy, sir. If I feel like I've left politics and I have not been genuinely able to empower people, I would feel as if I failed. I would feel as if I have failed, sir. And as I said to you, sir, it's not about moving from material possession to material possession. I am normally unimpressed by material excess. That don't faze me. I don't care what people have. But it matters to me, sir, that if a man, sir, cannot, despite the fact that he wants to, cannot do better than the situation, the government can help him. And the banks can help him, sir. And we're not helping him, sir, then it is us who've let the people down. And that is why I am thankful for this resolution, sir, to bring affordable housing to people. It is critical, sir. And as we build, sir, I mean, when I left my Lord, sir, I moved up in the world and I moved in the plane. I say so all the time. The plane for me was a step up in the ladder. I had an indoor facility then. It was like moving into the Ritz. So when people lambaste the plane, know that they're lambasting the place that I love the most in the world. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, sir, when you build a housing scheme or a housing facility, and you bring all of these people who are in a particular economic bracket, and you build a very small basketball court that can hold 10 people at a time, and you got thousands of people waiting to use the basketball court. Or you build 2 football fields and have thousands of young men waiting to play football. You build one park. You don't repair the park at all. So you build it, you post the pictures of it, but then if you put your children on it, they're likely to catch tetanus because the thing's rusting. Don't fix them at all. But you are asking poor people, children then, to find something to do. What are they going to do? Because we got to see housing, sir, as much bigger than a housing solution. And if we continue to look at our social issues in silos, sir, we are perpetuating this issue. We cannot look at our social problems in silos. You put a man in a housing scheme, sir, but half of them ain't working. The place look popped down. The garbage ain't collect. But lately, sir, thanks to the honorable member, St. Michael East, I can't hear people complaining about garbage collection at all. As a matter of fact, I was in Pine Yard and it clean. The garbage collect, the grass done cut. Between you and the honorable member for St. Michael Southeast, but they're doing a great job. Huh? But Mr. Speaker, sir, we also have to be able to allow people to build a little something. So I would love to see more, when we build these communities, sir, people having little empowerment ranges, sir, food stalls, something they could play a trade, something. So because the housing solution is only part of the solution. When we built the Pioneer, imagine when we built Gower Hill and Silver Hill, people were very excited, but 20, 30 years later, 30, 40 years later, we realized, sir, that those things by themselves, sir, do not solve social problems. As a matter of fact, those things by themselves tend to further aggravate social problems. So that we need a comprehensive look at all these things, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'm also equally pleased about the resolution because it's also a tourism development resolution. So I imagine as part of this build-out, sir, we're going to be seeing facilities, sir, for tourists. And that is a good thing because I imagine where we're building for tourists, sir, we're going to be looking to build the nicest facilities, sir, so that average people will be exposed to those things. Yeah, the thing is, sir, I remember when I was about 15 years ago, I can't remember, there was a policy in Barbados. The honorable members who were here for a while may remember, where I think it was this government maybe, that has said if you build, if you want to cut land, if you cut above 40 lots, you got to cut a space for poor people or middle income or lower income people. If you drive around Barbados, it used to amuse me that when you drive around, especially in the north, in some of the newer developments, there's one I know for sure, you would see 39 lots being cut because they ain't cutting the 40th. Because the 41st got to be for poor people. So, you know, people smart. So the policy was if you build above 40, if you cut above 40 lots, you got to accommodate lower socioeconomic bracket, the lower socioeconomic bracket. So people start cutting 39. As a government, sir, we cannot be asleep at the wheel. It is a good thing to try to merge the tourism development and the affordable housing, sir. I feel that when people see things, sir, they want to aspire for certain things. One of the problems I've always had with housing schemes, I might have said it in here before, I don't know. But one of the problems that I've always had with housing schemes is that the moment you you go to university, let's say, you struggle through university, Mr. Speaker, sir, or college, or you finish your CSCs and you get a little pick. The moment you start making, let me say, $1,600, $1,700 a month, your mother, who might have been unemployed, or in my case, a conductress making just below minimum wage, or just above minimum wage. When I started to work now, making 17-something a month, automatically you're put in the bracket now where you're too rich to be living in a government house. Man, you ain't got nothing in life. You ain't own nothing in life. But you shouldn't be living in government units. So when they do their assessment of where you live, all of a sudden you know are outside of the range of the people who should be living in the house. The problem with that then is that forces the person out to go and rent some $1,200 place, mind you, I'm making $1,700. So it forces you now into poverty. And it therefore leaves your same mother or your father back in the house by themselves, struggling again because so instead of having one family that barely now be making it, you got two struggling families. It doesn't make sense. But here is the deeper tragedy of it all. When you take out those people who are now in a position, who went to university or who got a little job, you're taking out all the good examples out of the same communities. So all you will leave behind in the communities are the persons who by some definition really and truly didn't make it. So the ones who you believe have made it, you want to take them out. And you leave everybody else behind, sir, who are struggling. That does not make sense to me. Because you cheat the people who live in the area of an opportunity to see somebody who has been able to come from the bottom, sir, and do something with their life. It does not make sense to me, sir. And therefore, this policy of trying to have middle income and lower income and upper income people together, sir, it makes sense. Let people see something else. In my constituency, sir, I'm starting a program which I call A Second Life, where, for me, I knew what took me out the pine on weekends. Sometimes, not me, I never played, but I would go and watch my St. Michael's school friends, because my pine friends ever play in a golf. My pine friends ain't playing a badminton. My pine friends ain't going swimming for no weekend. We swim at the beach, we head off the jetty. We ain't going to the aquatic center. But I knew on Saturdays and Sundays when some of them were going to piano lessons and things I never did. But I know, sir, that it makes a difference in the lives of children. So that you have to create a system where you sometimes take them out of the same communities that they live in. Take them somewhere else. Let them see something else. And I also know, sir, and I believe this in my heart, sir, in those communities like Pine and Gore Hill and Silver Hill and where poor people gather, there is an abundance of natural talent, and the reason it does not flourish has nothing to do with the genetics or the DNA, but it has to do with the system that serves to squeeze the life out of poor people. That is what I know. And therefore, it's important, sir, that we expose them, sir, to something different. This housing development, sir, that marries some aspects of tourism, sir, is important. And I do hope that when facilities are built up around the tourist, as it tends to happen organically, that the same people who reside in these areas get to serve them too, so that they can make $1, so that everybody could live. That is important, sir. And then, you know, social policy, sir, is about meeting needs, managing social problems, creating opportunity. When we do these housing solutions, sir, I hope we're able to meet the needs of people. Sir, we manage the social problems that are inevitable, that is spurring up across all over Barbados now, sir, but they have to give people opportunities for advancement, and that we need a comprehensive social policy, sir, that includes housing. And you would know, because I'm talking to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, but you're a long time deconverted. You taught this stuff. You're a seasoned social scientist and a seasoned social worker. But that we have to integrate these things, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have to integrate these things, or we would be boasting today, as we did when we built the Pine and Gore Hill and Silver Hill, and crying tomorrow when they manifest themselves because there has been a certain amount of dereliction in our duties, sir, in terms of looking at the other aspects of development, sir. And it is going to be vitally important. Before I close, sir, it was mentioned about the building out at sea, sir. We are about to do that. I'm actually, sir, expecting to have in my hands the report on Phase 1B of the islands by the end of March, and to have a conversation with Barbados about what that would look like. But it's important for us to make the point, sir, that the government does not intend to carry any debt for this, that we're working with persons, sir, who would build out the islands, sir, so that the debt becomes that person, sir, but the islands, sir. And any beach, it must be made clear, sir, that any beach associated with the islands remains the property of Barbadians. They're not private beaches in the plan, period. Period. So even as we talk about building out, sir, this is important. People are coming to me as Minister of Maritime Affairs, sir, lamenting about the state of the beaches. A lady called me. I put her to speak to the Honourable Member for St. Michael East, because we'd had a conversation on it, lamenting that she was running on Carlisle Bay and that she couldn't even run in a straight road now because there were chairs stretched from the top of the beach right to the water, and that you couldn't get past the chairs because people now have come to the understanding, or the misunderstanding, that they own to the high water mark, and the high water mark means everything, and that therefore you cannot now run on the beach. You can hardly pass. It has to stop. Mr. Speaker, sir, it has to stop. And that the NCC has regulations, sir, where people have to apply and get permission, whether you think you own the space or not. People can't even access the beach. People can't get into the water. It does not make sense, sir. There's a whole set of regulation that has to come to that whole areas, including the jet ski men, the small craft operators who carry out your children, sir, on party boats and don't have any kind of training at all. You could be a captain of a party boat and never train. And all everybody's lives on these boats, sir. So there's a whole set of regulations that must come, sir, to that aspect of life. But as we manage, sir, the ocean space, because our sea space is 424 times the size of our land space, our EEZ. 424 times. 424 times the opportunity. 424 times the likelihood, unless we manage it well, for things to go wrong. And there's a lot of experience that we have on the land, sir, that we now have to take into the ocean, sir. I am thankful to hear that, Mr. Speaker, sir. We've had a conversation, myself and the Honourable Member for St. Michael East, sir, where we spoke of, I won't call the person or the place, but we knew that in the dead of night, mysteriously, some big coconut trees just appear in a certain spot because people determine that they own the space and inhibiting other people from having access to that space. Them kind of things, sir, are wrong and they don't make sense. And if we as a government do not stand up for the people who put us in this place, well, we will not be in this place for long. And I know the people in Bayland and in Brittenstill and in Charleston and in Dawes Road put me here to protect their interests. And St. Michael South, sir, has a lovely stretch of beach on Carlisle Bay, and that beach belongs to the people. Gabby ain't wrong. The beach belongs to the people, sir.
So that all the land in Barbados, so no matter what we do, no matter how we build out, Mr. Speaker, sir, it has to be for the average Barbadian. It has to be for the average Barbadian, sir. So as I close, sir, I just want to say that I support this resolution entirely. I look forward to what we are able to do, sir. That we are not obsessed with the idea of building, because you know, son, the last government said they built X amount of houses. I built 50 houses, and when you look, 49 of them ain't going to body. 49 of them, 49 ain't going to body, and 46 falling apart. A madness. So you can pat yourself on the back. I ain't come to pat myself or nobody on the back. I come to stop poor people from being poor, the way the former member for St. Peter used to say. Our job is to stop poor people from being poor. To empower people, sir. To share the cake, empower other people. So I support this resolution, Mr. Speaker, sir. I support it entirely. I've expressed the areas that I believe, sir, that we need to flesh them out. I believe that it has to be a bigger conversation, of course, but I give my wholehearted support to the resolution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Honourable Member for St. George North.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome this opportunity to share a few thoughts on this very important land acquisition. It's important for us to reflect as well as to look at some of the things that can be done with this land acquisition and to see how it can benefit the wider cross-section of Barbados. I believe that the Land Acquisition Act has helped us over the past years and will continue to help us as we go forward. Once this particular...
Honourable Member, you don't have to express any anguish. I will soon ask people to demit from the chamber. Continue, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But we need, Mr. Speaker, to look at how it can benefit our society, how this public purpose can be beneficial to a large cross-section of our society. And I must, from the outset, state that last Tuesday, the bank holiday, 21st, I will always remember that evening, I journeyed from St. Lucie after having a nice affair with my friend, the representative for St. Andrew and representative for St. George South. Of course, the member for St. Joseph was not there, he was absent. And in St. Lucie, we had a great time on that occasion. But after I left there, I had to come to St. Michael. And I went to a place called Bush Hall. I'm sure you're familiar. Bush Hall.
Bush Hall, Honourable
Bush
Member.
Hall.
Yes.
Not the other one that other persons
Bush
are
Hall.
more
Bush
familiar
Hall,
with.
Honourable Member. Bush Hall.
That begin with H, but it's
Bush
Hall.
Hall, Honourable Member.
And I went there because I could not find a suitable place to buy a liquor after certain hours. And I went to Bush Hall, and I journeyed down through Bush Hall, and I met, on that occasion, it was about 10:30 in the evening, a large number of persons, with a big crowd. I could not believe that on a bank holiday night, so late, that you will see so many people congregating within that community. And when I got there, one of the guys recognized me and said, come on down, we want to see you in this area. So I went, and I had a little social with the guys. And one of the questions I asked was, what are some of the things you guys want down here? What are some of the things you want our government to do? And many of them said, okay, of course we want work. Work was the number one. Housing was number two. And of course, things like recreation and proper lighting. Now, these are the things that, when I listen to the member for St. Michael South, he talked about the social policy of a government. And I must say that social policy of government does not only mean in theory, it means that it must put these things in action. And one of the things that the BLP government is noted for is good social policy. We were able to create employment. And I remember a former Prime Minister said that we want to create 30,000 jobs. We want to create employment. We want to set a housing policy in a way that the average person will have a house. We want to be able to do this. And in our term in government, we have to be able to put our social policy in a way that will benefit the average individual. Now these guys, and there were many guys, I think there were more guys, men there than women. Most of these men signal out employment. We have to generate employment. We have to be able to provide housing for the poor. True rhetoric is good, but we have to be able to come to the table and say, how are we going to do these things? The whole question is important. How are we going to assess these problems? Out of this conversation with these gentlemen, I came up with a program that years ago, I remember I had discussed with the leadership of this party, that there is need for a rapid renewal program in St. Michael. A rapid renewal program in St. Michael. And the reason why I say that, in order for us, Mr. Speaker, to provide, and it is important, because poor lighting, derelict properties. St. Michael, some years ago, had over 1,800 derelict housing in St. Michael alone. Bush needs to be cleared. If you go into any of the housing area in Barbados today, you see a lot of garbage on the street. Garbage collection is a key. Housing is important, but garbage collection and poor lighting must be improved as we go forward. And in today's society where you have crime on the increase, there must be proper lighting. People become very scared. People become frightened. People don't want to come out of their home because of poor lighting. We need to improve the lighting, not only in certain areas, but all across St. Michael especially in our constituency too. You need proper lighting. I am not sure that the present solar lighting that is put down by the Barbados Light and Power is quite adequate. They need to put down more lighting in strategic places in order to satisfy the people within that community and also to help visitors as well as tourists and people to our island. Garbage collection must be a thing and must be seen as something of importance. It is true that we have inherited a poor program from the last administration, but we need to set out, Mr. Speaker, a situation where if you have a limited number of trucks, let's say we will collect garbage once a week, twice a week, and stick to that program. That program must be adhered to. And it's not unscientific about that. If you can only collect them once a week, say so. We don't expect to collect them 4 times a week. But if it is to be collected once a week, then collect once a week on a particular day. And I think we need to adhere to that program as well. The other question is of recreation in every area. We were able, in our time, to provide lighting and recreation in certain areas. Let's look at an area like the Pine, St. Michael Southeast, where there are a number of persons within that particular community. I am of the view that within your social policy for housing, there must be adequate recreation as well. Adequate recreation, adequate lighting for those fields that you're going to encourage persons to have either football, cricket, or something of that sort. I think our housing policy, therefore, should be all-encompassing of that in that nature. And therefore, a rapid renewal program for housing and for the areas in those in the areas that I consider to be poor housing, poor collection, and poor transportation, and poor social policy. I think that we need to look at a special program, and I hope that the Ministry of Finance will look at a program to help these people move into a rapid program that I have called for. Government can use fiscal incentives, for example, Mr. Speaker. So that you have the land, because people want land, and the Acquisition Act will provide land for the majority of people. Provide the land. Land is important because without land, you will not have housing. But having provide the land, then you need fiscal incentives, either to encourage people to build their own homes, to give them mortgages or long-term loans at lower interest rates. Maybe if within a particular area, if you say you designate, Mr. Speaker, a particular area as one that will attract fiscal incentives, you may give loans at free interest rates. And within a particular area, this can be done to help people to provide their own homes. There are lots of people who will not be able, Mr. Speaker, to provide their own homes with their salaries. There are too many people who are working for minimum wages. And with minimum wages, with 2 or 3 children, you cannot build a home. You cannot repair a home. You cannot provide windows. You cannot provide doors. You cannot provide flooring. So therefore, the government needs to come up with a program of fiscal incentives. Fiscal incentives similar to what was done a couple of years ago when the Minister of Housing, the member for St. Andrew, was there, when the General Workers Loan Fund was given, persons were allowed to use the General Workers Loan Fund to borrow up to $100,000 at very low interest rates. I'm not sure what is the status of the General Workers Loan Fund today, but the average worker today cannot get a loan. The average worker in Barbados today, Mr. Speaker, cannot go. He might go to the credit union and they can take him forever. The credit unions do not give loans readily to their members without a struggle. And that's a fact. And how much do they get? What type of interest do they attract? The banks, again, very reluctant to give mortgages as well. And if they do, you have to bring down your mother, grandmother, and everybody. You have to do all these things in order to get adequate loans. And I believe the Minister of Housing must put in place facilities for the ordinary Barbadian to acquire a loan at low interest rates. And when I say interest rate, there were times when we were setting the interest rate at 10, 20 years ago, Mr. Speaker, at 5 or 6%. Today in North America, the banks, the same banks that you have operating in Barbados today, so Scotiabank, Royal Bank, the Bank of Canada, they are giving interest rates at 3% and 2 and 3% in North America. And if you fight hard, you might get it at 2% or 1%. Barbados banks are still giving loans at higher interest rates. The same banks operating out of North America. I don't understand why. So that persons find it difficult, Mr. Speaker, to build their homes. And they rely on urban, they rely on the Rural Development Commission, but they cannot do all. And I'm saying to you, Mr. Speaker, that we need to put in place a rapid response where persons can get loans at no interest, and the government has to do that. Because the only body who can do it is the government, because investors will not put their money. And of course, years ago, we were thinking about the secondary mortgage market. I don't hear anybody talk about it. I don't hear the Ministry of Finance speaking about a secondary mortgage market at all. But the secondary mortgage market is merely up for the upper middle class and so on, where mortgage banks can buy out the persons who give the loan, in the first place and provide the banks with ready cash. But we definitely need a situation, Mr. Speaker, where we put money in housing, because we put the land is available, as I said before. When you get the land, you have to put a structure on it. When you put a structure on it, you have to be able to provide that incentive for people and for other persons to follow. So I believe, Mr. Speaker, that this particular acquisition is important. We need to see more, because we definitely need to see more available lands available throughout the country. I heard the minister spoke about land that was acquired over 2000, from 2002. I acquired a parcel of land at Market Hill, St. George, has not been turned into anything. So you still have land that was acquired years ago, but still there because of little problems in terms of compensation which need to be earned out. I'm glad that the minister has stuck to his guns, that the land is acquired, is government land, and therefore the next step would be to put in the roads and allow people to have those house spots. But when the house spots are available, then you need to provide them, especially for low-income earners, you need to provide the opportunity for them, people to acquire mortgages at the lowest interest rates available at the time, so that it will help those persons to whom the land will be provided for as well. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, as well too, that when you have this type of development, you not only provide for the householder, but you provide, Mr. Speaker, for persons, because a good housing policy provides not only work for persons in the construction of the houses, like plumbers, surveyors, draftsmen, architects, and so on. You're not only providing work for those people, but you provide work for bankers and lawyers. A good housing policy will turn around this country. It will turn around the country, because a lot of people can be employed by a good housing policy that will help our country. And the Land Acquisition Act starts that program. But once that program has been started in terms of acquiring the land, then you need to turn it around, because by turning it around, you'll be providing employment for a wide cross-section of people. And when you do this, people will spend. People will spend. Once people are working, once you have a number of persons working within your society as masons, as carpenters, as plumbers, as truck drivers, and so on, bringing the material, then that economic activity, Mr. Speaker, will be helpful to our economy. And that's the reason why an economy can be turned around, but you have to be able to invest money into this housing activity. So I believe, Mr. Speaker, that lots can be done, but we need to see a policy that is not only, as I heard members talk about, sustainable. A policy that is sustainable for the low-income earners will be important. And you have to create that sustainability, especially if you have affordable housing and housings that are made available. Because still many people ask us, Mr. Speaker, for affordable housing. Affordable housing is difficult. It's very difficult at this time. But if you do it in terms of providing that interest-free loan or whatever, and providing the infrastructure, as the minister said, that one of the ministries will be doing, this will bring the cost of certain houses down, and it will help the poor in this country. So that within this particular term, I will be grateful to see the minister look not only the acquisition of land, but also look carefully at how we can help provide financing for the majority of persons who want not only to build homes, but also to improve their homes, improve flooring, improve windows, improve roofs. All of these things are important, and this would help us in our society to not only develop a society that has long been looked at as a very important infrastructure in our economy, housing. Years ago, Mr. Speaker, I have spoken about this many times ago, that one of the things that were discussed by the Moyne Commission was housing, poor, derelict housing. And of course, that was cited way back in 1945 or thereabout. Today, we still have a number of things that, if you look back 50 or so years ago, you can still see semblance of that society. So we need to move forward. We need to put a program at this juncture in time. We cannot hope for 20 years from now. The time is right for a BLP government, which we know have always delivered. The time is right now for this administration to put new policies in place to move the housing sector forward, to renew our society and to make our society more modernized. And by modernized, Mr. Speaker, I'm not only speaking about new housing with new financing, I talk about new transportation availability, I talk about garbage collection, I talk about proper sewage. All of these things are important for us to do at this juncture. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to join this debate on this housing resolution. Very important resolution, Mr. Speaker, and the contributions thus far have been noteworthy. Very interesting contributions. The last member, Mr. Speaker, spoke about the impact of housing and the role housing will play. He didn't use the words, but the role housing will play in economic development of this country. He recognized that as you acquire land to develop or to bring housing solutions to the people of this country, what you'll bring with it is the whole aspect of commerce and small business, the electricians and the artisans. And indeed, if we follow the Barbados Labour Party model of not only building housing, but providing housing solutions. And I will pick up a bit on the member for St. Michael East, because I listen to him, and when he speaks, Mr. Speaker, I kind of get goose pimples at times, because he speaks to the role of housing solution in empowering and enfranchising the working class people. He used the word poor, and some use marginalized, and those persons who don't have the opportunity. So he used the word poor. We said disenfranchised. But, Mr. Speaker, the reality is that when you, as a government, and this government, acquire land for housing, we look at the holistic approach to the housing solution. The enfranchisement of the working class person in this country, the whole aspect of empowering the small businessman, and we also look at the family. Because when you build housing and you provide affordable housing or housing solutions, if you want to limit it to housing solutions within the urban and the rural corridors, we think about family. And we, as a Labour Party, we pride ourselves on providing housing solutions whereby the family unit is indeed empowered And when I say empowered, within each family unit, you'll find those skills. The mason, the carpenter, the plumber, the steel bender. So we provide housing solutions, and this has happened in the past under the Labour Party. Check our manifestos. And I'm going back there because there is a consistent thread that runs through the bowels of the Labour Party that speak to empowering people as we provide housing solutions. Because families rather the land. And why families rather the land? Because we have within this family unit the plumbers in the Pine, in St. Thomas, the carpenters in St. Joseph in Horse Hill, the steel benders in the Ivy, the electricians, and in Everton, of course, and in St. Michael South, and in St. Peter, and St. Philip West, and St. John, and of course we can't forget St. Michael Northwest. We have those skills within the family unit that allow us to make housing affordable for the working class people in this country. And that's what the Labour Party prides itself on. So I joined this debate, Mr. Speaker, to congratulate the member for St. Andrew. And indeed, he's doing a remarkable job in his ministry. He's doing a remarkable job in his ministry. And I'm going to go to a place where I don't think that the honorable member for St. Andrew went, because he tipped the iceberg, but I going deep into this place. The last government came to office back then, a time where we all want to forget because of what happened in this country, but they pride themselves on building affordable housing. And I'm sure the member for St. Thomas has that manifesto of the last government. We keep them not because we want to read them and follow them, but we want to show that they have failed. So we keep them in our bosoms and we lay them out here in this lower chamber to look at, so that the new members can look at them to see how the former Minister of Housing, that had a picture in the last manifesto back then, I think back in 2012, 2013, member for St. Thomas helped me, a picture of a wonderful, beautiful houses, saying this is 2013 manifesto. The front page of the Democratic Labour Party manifesto was beautiful housing. And I go there because I want to say to this country and to the lower chamber, between 2013 and now, what has happened with housing in this country? And the member for St. Andrew went there, and I told him I'm going to go there. I'm going to follow up on what he started in this chamber from 2013 to 2018. Look at that manifesto and look at what transpired as it relates to housing solutions in this country. If you were building housing or providing housing solutions for the working class people in this country, what the member for St. Michael East referred to as the poor man, and the member for St. Michael South, who's from the Pine, just like me from Ellerton, we're from poor and humble origins. So we understand the importance of providing housing solutions for poor people in this country. And if we look at what was done to the landscape of this country, we can refer to the Grotto. We can refer to those up in St. Philip, just below District C Police Station, where the member for Parshland, Valerie. Refer to all those housing solutions between 2013 and 2018. What happened in this country? I run a constituency office, a very proud one that is active, one where you see my people on a daily basis, even when I was in opposition. I ain't changed. I've racked it up. And most requests that I get on a weekly basis, they're for housing or housing solutions in this country. And if the Democratic Labour Party won a government in 2013 on providing housing solutions, they lost it in 2018 for failing to provide housing solutions for the average man in this country. And we as a government, and again I want to congratulate one of my political mentors, the member for St. Michael, the member for St. Andrew, because I know he understands this better than most of us. And also our Prime Minister, the leader, the member for St. Michael Northeast. She understands it better than all of us. Because indeed, when she elected him to go into that ministry, she knew what she was doing. And all of us, because we can see the results. Each of us are properly placed. And I want to thank her for her wisdom and her foresight. Because what we're about to embark upon and what we have started in this country is to ensure that the poor people of this country get their fair share of housing solutions. And what we are about to embark upon in this country is to ensure that the family unit, those persons with the skills from the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institution, from the skills training, those persons who acquire the skills by observations and by working alongside the experienced people, that is how we as a country develop. I have a grandfather, the late great Stephen Llewellyn Sutherland, who was the district butcher and family doctor. He never went to Penn State University to learn how to blow wells, but he had a license, and he went to the main yard to collect dynamite and cap and fuse, and he blew wells in St. George. So that when I became eligible to offer myself to this great institution on behalf of the people, and I went around St. George South, I was told, your grandfather dug my well. Some even said he dug them for free. Because for him, it was about building a community and not about earning money. And of course, I rode on his coattail, thanks to him, but he left that legacy for me to carry on. And here I am carrying it on. Successfully, I may say, on behalf of the poor people of St. George, we have
I remember you're not blowing wells, though.
No, I am not. I am not. We have developed, because through his wisdom, Mr. Speaker, we are now sending the young people to university to learn how to deal with these matters. And technology has taken over, because we are putting down seismographs now in areas to tell us what we should do and how we should do it. But that is how we develop as a people. And the member for St. Michael's, he doesn't know how he impacts me when he speaks about the average man and the poor people. And also the member for St. Michael's South. They're like me, the same origin. And also the member for St. Peter. I won't say certain things about him that I know. But if you want to talk about enfranchisement and empowerment and poor people with a vision, his father had many of them. He didn't wake up one morning and achieve success. He had to work hard. He came up poor, just like the member for St. Philip West, my good friend. So we understand what we are doing here in this house today. We understand what we are doing here in this house today. This is indeed a powerful initiative by the Labour Party, and that's why I had to rise, because the member for St. Michael East pulled me out of my seat when he said we all have to speak on this. We are not about grandstanding and asking our people to just listen to us as we carry on what was left of the last administration. This is a party with a difference. This is an administration and a government with a difference, who's providing affordable housing solutions. We are not just acquiring land willy-nilly. That is a phrase that we use in the country and also in urban Barbados. But Mr. Speaker, I wish to go into this whole aspect of acquiring land willy-nilly, because the member for St. Michael, the member for St. Peter teased me today when he said that land was acquired in St. George, and indeed he recognized that this land that was acquired under the last administration was acquired willy-nilly. He didn't use those words, but he hinted that, insinuated. Because, Mr. Speaker, we inherited at Brighton, and I met with the Brighton plantation owner in St. George, some land that was acquired, some fertile land for agriculture, to build housing. I will repeat that. Some fertile land that was acquired in St. George to build housing. And Mr. Speaker, when I toured the Brighton and Butters area with the plantation owner, he said to me, "Parliamentary representative, this is land that should remain in agriculture. And if we follow agriculture, plantation by plantation," and the member for St. Peter, I can challenge you on this one. I believe that the Brighton plantation is the most productive plantation, or one of the most productive plantations in this country. I don't want to call his name, because, Mr. Speaker, we have seen the last administration acquire good land and turn the land into commercial footprint or commercial property. And we are here recognizing that we have sufficient land, an abundance of land in this country, that we should do better, because we can build affordable housing on one hand, and we can support agriculture to reduce our food import bill on the other hand. But that's not what the last administration did. The last administration, and I don't like to go there because it is an indictment on the political class. When we speak about corruption, as we enter this lower chamber to carry out the work of our people in this country, whether rich or poor, black or white, we have a duty to our citizens. But some of us are not only myopic, but some of us are inwardly focused. Well, some of them, not us. I can speak for the members in this chamber, including the member for St. Michael West. I can speak for him in that category. I don't think he's any corrupt individual. He has probably misplaced priorities, but he's not corrupt. And I think we are doing a wonderful job on behalf of the citizens of this country. We have to, when we acquire land in this country, and again, kudos to the member for St. Andrew,
He's honorable member doing what?
the honorable member, thank you, Mr. Speaker, obliged, the honorable member. When we acquire land in this country, we are acquiring land for housing solutions that we know very well is not prime land for agriculture. And I've lived through it in the constituency of St. George South. But I don't want to go there because I have a section of St. George South that I love. It was fertile land, but I have houses, at least 100 and something houses there, and I love the people. I spend a lot of time there. So I don't want to go there with that area. But we have to be mindful when we acquire land in this country that we are not acquiring land at the expense of good agriculture in this country. And I speak on behalf of my good friend for St. Philip South, who's on an assignment presently. And we spoke earlier today because he wanted me to get that plug in for his area of expertise, the Ministry of Agriculture, because the land that the last administration acquired affected our food import bills significantly because they acquired fertile land, agricultural land, and put in housing, when we had other land that we could have put into housing. Mr. Speaker, I have some disgruntled constituents presently in the constituency of St. George South. Between the 2013 election and the 2018 election, the last administration came to my people. They thought that walking around with a sheet and asking the people of St. George South to sign on it, they did it in 2013. We have housing at Brighton, Butters, we have housing at Todd's. We're going to give you a playing field at Todd's. We're going to give you a playing field at Workman. I'm going to speak to those at the end. And a lot of my people sign, and I say my people, I'm the parliamentary representative, whether B, D, Z, X, Y, I represent each and every one of them. My people in St. George South. And they signed on a sheet of paper like this, place the name. Some photocopied them and sent to me, and I have those copies. Some are here. I ain't going to make them any document in the house, because I'm not going to expose my people. But at the end of the day, what they got nothing. By the last administration, it was an election gimmick, just to defeat me in 2013, and then to unseat me in 2018. It was an unsuccessful ploy, a malicious one, a very wicked one by the last administration. So I have a whole list of constituents from St. George South who signed on a list. I don't mind them coming to me saying that they need housing. Of course, my back is broad. I have to make sure that we as a government do right by the people of St. George South, just like how we have to do right by the people of St. Michael South, St. Philip West, St. John, St. Andrew, St. Michael Northwest, the city, St. Michael Southeast by my sister. We have to do well by the people. So when we are looking at housing solutions, we are trying to correct, or we will correct, those wrongs that the Democratic Labour Party put our people through. You know, with signing, we had over 100 signatures. Member for the honorable member for St. Andrew, we had over 100 signatures for land at Todd's. I don't know if 100 house spots are at Todd's, but we have over 100 signatures for house spots at Todd's lands under the last administration. They also promised a playing field. The Clico lands, I won't go there because I know we as a government will unravel that. They came and they promised a playing field at Todd's. They don't have any playing field yet. But I've asked the people of Todd's to bear with me as this government unravels those wrongs by Clico lands. And I know that the member for St. Andrew will address the house spots at Todd's. They may not be 100, but he'll make sure that the people of St. George have their fair share of house spots, affordable house spots. He'll make sure that the vision and the philosophy of the Labour Party, driven by the family unit, of having your brother being the artisan, the electrician, and your nephew being the mason, and your cousin being the steel bender, and now the females have gotten into it. You know, we are not excluding them because we have some female artisans as well. Will be part of the housing solution for the people, whether in Tulls or in Workman's or in Bottles or wherever. And I've asked the member for St. Andrew as well to enter discussions with the plantation owner at Brighton, because the land that was acquired under the last administration is not fit for housing. It is good agricultural land, or it protects good agricultural land, and we can do other things with it. And the plantation owner has said to us he will allocate other lands for housing. And I've had that discussion with the member for St. Andrew. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm just using the constituency that I represent to show you what went on in this country under the last administration and why that 2013 manifesto that had the picture of housing solutions, and they premised themselves of retaining a government on housing solutions and utilizing any willy-nilly person to build houses. That's why we have such travesty at Parshland. The due diligence was not done, and the last administration, as opposed to doing what we are doing, developing the skills among our people, they chose any willy-nilly to build a house. And that is what they call housing solutions. Mr. Speaker, my words to the people of this country: we, as a government, we recognize the social aspect of housing solutions as well as the economic aspect. We recognize those persons who seek housing solutions in this country, as the member for St. Michaelis mentioned, are, I won't say the less fortunate, but are those persons who can't afford to build a mansion on top of a hill. They're the persons in the lower spectrum in terms of take-home pay. I'm not talking about attitude, because some of those persons are indeed very astute as it relates to their discipline and everything. But the reality is that we have to cater to that category of person in this country. And most of our housing solutions are not housing solutions on top of a hill. So we understand who we are catering to. And I want to compliment the Prime Minister in closing for her leadership and her focus on indeed looking at the social element of our housing solutions and how we indeed can develop this country and how we can rid ourselves of the pit toilets that the member for St. Michael East spoke about. I came up in the pit toilet era. I might not look that way.
Honourable member, you have 2 more minutes.
But I knew family members who had pit toilets. I'm not ashamed to say that. The former member for Christchurch East Central got a hair one there. He sat where the honourable member for St. Michael's Southeast is now sitting. And he said to me, and I will continue to repeat this, because he saw it as an insult, but I saw it as power to me. He said, oh, don't mind you, your grandmother wipe up the tables after I eat and I left my food. She was a janitor at the den. The former member for St. Michael East, the former member for Christchurch East Central did that in this lower chamber. Asked the member for St. Michael West. Christchurch East Central. I ain't calling his name. Saw him on TV the other night. He said, don't mind you. Your grandmother mop up after me. But she raised 5 children from mopping up after him, of which my mother was one, the first. And then she raised 3 sons. One is an economist in Canada right now. Here I am, representing the people of this country, seeking to enhance our status as a developing country. So she played her role, even mopping up after him. He saw it as an insult, but he saw it as power to me. And he did that in this chamber. Asked the member for St. James North and also St. James Central, because the member for St. James Central took it to task. After that, I will always remember that. And I sat where the honourable member for St. Michael Northwest is sitting. God rest Pearl Harewood in her grave, my grandmother, a beautiful woman. She was a janitor at the Christchurch Boys School. They call it what now? They call it some other name now. Lynch. Milton Lynch. But I stand here because she herself went through the pit toilet days. But she raised persons, according to the member for St. Michael East, who are no longer in the pit toilet days. And that is what this government is about. We are preparing Barbados for future generations, for our children, and our children's children, for 50 and 60 years down the road and 100 years down the road. So they will not have to endure what my grandmother endured. And they will not have to go through what I went through in this chamber under the former member for Christchurch East Central.
Honourable member, you watch working? Your watch is working? Just checking.
Mr. Speaker,
I just checking. That's all I asked you.
in closing,
The answer is either yes or no.
Mr.
Is
Speaker,
your watch working, Honourable? That's what I'm asking.
it is.
Thank you. That's what
It is. I am hearing the member for
No, I just asked a question.
St. Peter Watts.
I just want an answer, Honourable.
And
Continue.
indeed, it is working. But I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity. And I want to say to the country that you are in good hands under the leadership of Mayor Amor Motley. You are in good hands as it relates to providing housing solution. You're in good hands under the Honorable Prime Minister, and we're on a mission to rescue this country, and we're on a mission as it relates to the associated resolution to provide affordable housing solutions that we can leave as a legacy for our children and our children's children in this country. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I remember, I'm sure that your watch probably stopped working. Your watch probably stopped working.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
I remember, Microsoft, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to enter this debate in relation to the compulsory acquisition of lands at Harry Smith in the parish of St. Philip. And I do so, Mr. Speaker, because I have particularly enjoyed contributing to many housing debates in this chamber and in the other place, particularly because housing, just like education to a large extent, helps to transform the lives of individuals in our society. And I couldn't allow this debate on this acquisition to pass without just saying a few words in support of my colleague for bringing this resolution, which will address not just housing development, but also the aspect of tourism development. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that it is important for this government to be able to twin not only tourism development and to be able to build out this economy through what is one of our major drivers in the economy, the tourism sector, but also to be able to find ways through generating that revenue to pay for a number of other social services, including the area of housing development as well. And I believe that this is a long-standing understanding from this administration as it relates to how to drive the engine of economic growth in this society. And this resolution, like many others over the coming months, and certainly in the last 18 months, are intended to support the focus and the vision of this administration. Now, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the things that the last administration did not do in relation to housing, because I believe that we have all learned from the lessons of the past what we collectively and individually must never allow in the history of this parliament, and certainly in the history of governance in this country, to ever be the order of the day. But I think it is important that when we speak in these debates, whether it is on housing, it's on education, whether it's on transport, that these debates and the symbolism of these types of resolutions must always be spoken to in a context of where we are, where we want to go, but equally where we have come from. And certainly when we were in opposition, Mr. Speaker, we highlighted often the things that we wanted to see as an opposition party, what we wanted to see when we came to government. And as a government, we now have a responsibility, being the government, to ensure that a number of the things that we highlighted as problems, that we have a responsibility to be able to fix. It therefore means, sir, that in looking at how we address the issue of development, it requires that this administration must have a plan. We accuse the last administration of not having a proper housing policy, not looking at being able to cater for all levels of persons in our society who wanted to ensure that they could have affordable housing in this country. And I know that the Honourable Minister has been working very assiduously, and his other colleague minister as well, to ensure that we are moving in the direction where in the next decade, certainly, that we will have a very clearly articulated policy as it relates to being able to address not just low-income housing or middle-income housing, but also to address the issues of development as it relates to tourism development, as well as it relates to agriculture and all of the other areas which are obviously pertinent to being able to plan effectively. Why I start there, sir, is because I honestly believe that given the issues of water scarcity that we have inherited, the breakdown of our sewage systems, the fact that we are grappling across ministries with decaying plants, that we have to be real and we have to level with the country in relation to what we have actually inherited and the difficulties in certainly being able to realize the vision that we have for this country. Whether we were exposed to pit toilets or poor housing conditions in this chamber or any other place, I think we are all agreed and united on the fact that housing is important to all Barbadians. None of us as representatives like to be placed in a position where we have to encounter persons who are unable to provide adequate housing for themselves, or as many of us are often facing persons who want to acquire housing, whether at a low rent or whether it is to own their first home. And you heard other colleague ministers in here this afternoon, sir, speak to their own personal experiences of wanting to be able to own their own homes and coming from backgrounds where the whole notion of being able to acquire housing was particularly empowering and certainly important in being able to have their own social advancement in society. What does it mean though, sir? It means that we have a situation right now which has been taking place for a number of years where we have more requests for housing than we actually have housing accommodation. And I think we have to start there. We also have a situation where in relation to where persons, the majority of the persons are coming from who are requiring accommodation, many of them, sir, all of the studies have shown that many of them are certainly in the urban districts. And I heard other colleagues speak to the issue of, I think a member for St. George North would have spoken earlier, in relation to looking at an urban renewal development plan. I certainly support that because, again, we have a situation in the St. Michael areas where there's a lot of overcrowding in many households. You sometimes have, whether it is housing areas or it is in other districts, you have a lot of issues of intergenerational poverty. And these are things that I believe are impacting on what we are seeing manifesting itself in society, issues of crime. Persons are in overcrowded conditions, poverty is at its peak, and levels of unemployment in some cases, people are grappling with those issues. As a consequence, sir, it is leading to high levels of crime in our society as well. And I think we have to get to a realization that the inability to provide adequately across all spheres of society for adequate housing also has an impact on our society and wider society as we start to grapple with a number of these issues. Sir, I have often said in this chamber, I repeat myself over and over because I have what I consider the largest housing area in the country. It is one that I'm very proud of. It has produced the member for St. Michael South and others of distinguished character who have not forgotten where they have come from and continue to champion the rights of the people from whence they came. But sir, I have had concerns over the years because I have felt that we needed to look at how we speak to persons at the lowest level of our society, the low-income persons. Now, I sat in this chamber for many years, and I heard all about how the last administration had all the Housing Every Last Person program. They were going to ensure that persons had access to land. I mean, I was also the victim in my constituency, just as a member for St. George South, in relation to the rhetoric about how persons would be able to acquire their housing units under the 20-year program. You know, what I consider to have been an election ploy, because while none of us on this side would want to prevent people from being able to own their own home, it also required a conversation with the country and certainly with these individuals about how the housing estate was going to be maintained. There are commonwealths in many of these areas, whether it's the Pines, Silver Hill, Gall Hill, Eden Lodge, doesn't matter where the housing units are. We have common problems in relation to common use of a number of these things in the communities, which will, regardless of whether you convey the property in which the person is residing, the government still will have some responsibility to be able to carry the weight for the society, and in particular those individuals, to be able to address the issues of the wells, where wells cannot be dug individually for households. It will obviously have to carry in some way the issues of open spaces where there are large tracts of land which for the most part, are left in for the purpose of ensuring that the communities are not cramped, but at the same time, they create problems where we don't have the regular maintenance programs taking place in these communities. And that creates other issues in terms of rodents, it creates issues in terms of just being unsightly, and certainly areas where criminal activity can take place as well. So we have inherited over the years these issues. What we in this administration have a responsibility to do now is to engage in the plan of action to make sure that we're able to address not just the demands, but that we're able to let people across these developments fully understand the rights and responsibilities that they have, the rights and responsibilities they have as homeowners or potential homeowners, but also what rights and responsibilities the state will also be responsible for as well. And I'm happy to say, sir, that I have had colleagues in this chamber, both through the Minister of Housing, both ministers, the member for St. Michael East, even the member responsible for community development and youth affairs, where we have been able to work together in communities to be able to allow persons to breathe a little easier in terms of their environment. But it still requires that the accommodation in which people live must be looked at very seriously in terms of issues of maintenance. And we've seen the issues of maintenance taking place in education. We've seen it in terms of being able to have proper programs over the years in relation to our school plants. We're also seeing it in relation to whether it is sewage and the maintenance of the pipes, the underground pipes. We're seeing it in relation to transportation, the sewage trucks. These are our realities, and this is what we have inherited as an administration. We don't run from it, Mr. Speaker, but I think we have to let people understand where we are so that their expectations are real in terms of what we can deliver. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that we have had inherited an administration as well where the last one would have tried to get various housing projects going with international funding. They did not complete a number of the things that they had acquired the funding for, and we have lost out on a lot of that funding as well in relation to housing. It has left the Honourable Minister in a predicament where, with the best intentions in the world, he has been unable to deliver in the shortest time frame a number of the improvements that may need to be made, whether it's to the terrace units or to the same low-income housing. He has had to grapple with that as well. And I know that while I repeatedly say to both ministers in housing, the member for St. John and the member for St. Andrew, that every day I am facing requests from persons in my constituency for housing, I do understand the difficulties that they are enduring in relation to being able to meet the demands, because we are trying to meet in 18 months what was not met in 10 years. And even before that, previous administrations could also themselves not be able to adequately prepare for housing. Now, the Honourable Member for St. George North made an interesting point in relation to how housing development also impacts the society, how it gets you moving in terms of the economy. And it's a very valid point, because I remember as an attorney working for the Barbados Mortgage Finance Company, when a previous Barbados Labour Party administration was in a position to work together to have a number of opportunities for people who wanted to obtain mortgages. And we saw a spike in the number of homeowners in this country at different levels, low income, middle income. We also saw a boom in construction as well, because with every mortgage application came an opportunity for persons to engage in construction. And with that obviously meant that vendors were able to benefit. It meant that households were able to benefit. The outside men and the outside women were able to benefit as well. But money was circulating in the economy in a way that I believe once we are able to address a number of the issues that are confronting us in terms of the wider economy, that I'm sure that the Ministry of Housing will, in the fullness of time, be able to settle down to be able to move forward. Now, I know the Honourable Minister has also indicated there's a tripartite committee that is looking as well at the restructuring of the National Housing Corporation. We came to government with the understanding that we had to start a restructuring process of a number of, whether it was state-owned enterprises or generally the structure of government. I think it is well accepted that government has not been working for its people. And we need to ensure that as we move forward in our respective ministries, that we are in a position that when people apply for a house, that you don't keep hearing that the person applied 20 years ago and they heard nothing. These are the realities. And if it is that the Honorable Minister, as I'm sure he is now working on systems to be able to ensure that people who have been long-standing applicants of NHC are in a position to be interviewed and to update their records, or even for them to go into NHC to update their records. I believe that the time has now come for us to get serious about being able to identify the persons who are in the greatest need. Because, sir, I have found that sometimes you have people who applied 20 years ago, and their circumstances have not changed 20 years later. They may not have gone back into NHC repeatedly because they get frustrated after the first 2 or 3 phone calls or turning up every now and again. But we have to improve the systems so that people validly feel as though they are on some priority list, and that it isn't only an allocation based simply on who the minister knows, and I don't think that this minister would do it, but these are the fears that people have. And we have a responsibility to make sure that people believe that their needs can be addressed based on the urgency of their situation, particularly if they have a number of children who are likely to be displaced, that they will have the opportunity to have a system that is fair in terms of the allocation of houses. Now, one of the things I would not want to see again, and I know the Honourable Minister spoke to a joint public-private sector partnership in relation to the housing development, is what would, and I know it will not take place under his watch for sure, or the other minister, because one of the things that the special audit, which was laid in this chamber, the special audit on the National Housing Corporation, high-rise apartments at the Grotto, and Valerie would have revealed, was that a number of procedures were not followed by the last administration in terms of the way in which those particular projects were dealt with. And so we ended up with serious cost overruns in relation to both projects. Projects which, for the most part, the last administration indicated to this country that they were targeting persons in the lower economic bracket. And, you know, I got excited too when I heard the numbers in terms of the people who would have been accommodated at both of those projects, because the one at Valerie was intended to provide 72 units. The one at the Grotto was intended to provide another 76, I believe, and in the end, I think it was supposed to be about 80. But as excited as I got, and as excited as my constituents and many others in this chamber, their constituents got as well, the reality is that many of them were not able to acquire the units available even under these 2 projects. And what did we end up with, sir? We ended up with a situation where a project that started at Valerie at 15 million ended up costing an additional 7.7 million. In the case of the Grotto, we had a situation where the projected cost was 18 million, and it ended up costing another 9.8. Sir, the people of Barbados responded to, and this audit didn't come out until after, but I think the people of Barbados responded, as the Honourable Member for St. James, George South spoke to, the fact that an administration came to the people and told them they were going to provide certain things, and then they did not deliver. But they also responded as a country to a level of corruption in relation to what, as a country and a corporation, the National Housing Corporation said it would do, and that it did not do as well. And so I know that going forward, we have to be very cautious in terms of our joint public-private sector partnerships. I think it would be good reading for many to appreciate where the National Housing Corporation would have gone wrong as well back at that time, because a lot of technical input was not taken on board to be able to address a number of the issues. But the reality is that we then found that, you know, when you total what we have had in terms of cost overruns, you're talking about $16 million. That could very easily have provided housing for a number of persons that are presently displaced. That is what we are talking about. And while we don't want to belabor the point over and over that we have had a previous administration that has basically raped the Treasury and the Consolidated Fund, these things need to be known to the public that their monies, their hard-earned monies, have not been able to address the needs of the people in our society. Because, you know, Mr. Speaker, I deal with another issue, and I will just make the analogy because it is not just in housing that we've encountered these cost overruns. I have encountered it in the education sector as well, sir. There's a project in 6 Roads that started out costing $19 million. A school meals project, a center that was supposed to provide for or a main distribution area for the school meal centers. I mean, for those who have ever visited a number of the school meal centers, let me tell you, our school meals assistants and our cooks work under some serious conditions to be able to deliver food for the nation's children. They are in sometimes very hot conditions. They work though because they understand the importance of getting the food to the persons that they need to, the children who are the beneficiaries. But sir, it pains me to know that we have had to endure a facility which could already, it was supposed to start in 2012 and to be completed within 18 months. This is now 2020, sir, and we are still embroiled in a battle with the contractor over the completion of the project. A project that started under a Democratic Labour Party administration and has embroiled us in cost overruns, sir, that has now taken us to $26 million. I want you to understand where we are. That could have fed so many children. It could have ensured that we were in a financial position to improve the quality under which our existing workers are enduring. So just like Valerie Grotto, and we can go through all of the other projects that the last administration was responsible for, it is important that we contextualize where we are so that people's expectations are real, because a lot of money that could have been used to improve the lot of this land has been squandered. And it pains me, Mr. Speaker, to know that it has basically prevented a number of things that we came in with the greatest vision and the greatest will in the world to do. But in particular in housing, we find ourselves in a situation where the requests and the demands continue to be greater than the ability of the Ministry of Housing and certainly the National Housing Corporation to be able to meet the needs of the people. Sir, I'm going to touch as well on the issue of maintenance, because I believe that we must learn from our lessons. And in anything that we do in terms of housing and development is like the body. If you fail to look after the body and go to the doctor and to get your checkups, eventually you're going to break down. The maintenance of plant and property is absolutely no different. Previous administrations have failed miserably in being able to ensure that maintenance of plant and property is a priority. And so we've seen, whether it is in the housing estates, whether we've seen it in relation to even some of the same projects that the minister spoke to earlier, that they have now had to come in and basically put additional monies into to be able to try to maintain, or in some cases have to complete the projects. We have seen a wastage of funds because the longer that you fail to address the problem, you're going to have some serious consequences down the line as a result of that failure to put preventative measures in place. So we see it again in the schools. Failure to maintain the plant has now resulted in us having all of these environmental issues. Same thing in housing. We see what the issues in relation to failing to maintain wells has created for the Honorable Minister and this government, where we find ourselves in a position where it has taken a tragedy to be able to make people aware of how people live on a daily basis. And the Honourable Member for St. Michael South knows it is not what happened in relation to tragedy is not the creation of any one administration, but it is a failure in terms of our thinking as a people sometimes to recognize that preventative maintenance is the only way in which we are going to look after what we have spent our hard-earned dollars to be able to create. And the truth be told, sir, it is going to take a lot of money to be able to maintain housing estates. That is a fact. Even if you address all of the issues in relation to the encroachments, you still have to deal with the fact that you have some very old structures that you are dealing with. And therefore, it will require a phased approach, area by area, to be able to allow the Ministry of Housing to be able to touch all of the houses. And I'm pleased that the WELL program has started in St. Michael Southeast. I'm pleased that the program has started in St. James in relation to the electrical upgrades. I wish that we could move faster as an administration. But if we could move faster, we would have moved faster if we didn't have to deal with the cost overruns at Valerie, the Grotto, the Schools Meal Center, and all the other projects that we have had to inherit as well. So it is not by lack of will or dint of foresight by this administration that we don't want to provide the housing in the shortest time frame for our people. But we also have to start doing the unraveling and point the fingers where the fingers need to be pointed so that the public also understands exactly what we have inherited, what we are grappling with, and more importantly, the mindset that must change by the people who work within the system in relation to the importance of maintenance as well, of plant and property. Because we have to accept that many times things could have been avoided in terms of the maintenance of these structures. But sometimes the priorities have been misplaced in terms of what has been prioritized in housing developments as well, sir. And I think these are just some cautions and some advice and guidance that I would give the Honorable Minister, that we really need to take each of these areas that we understand are the housing areas across the country. We need to, and I know he has started the work in terms of prioritizing the wells in most of the areas. I mean, when you think there are 140-something wells, I believe, the Honourable Minister has said, are on the priority list. But that's not all the wells in the communities, sir. That is just the tip of the iceberg. Because even as I clean in St. Michael Southeast with the Honourable Member for St. Michael East, we discover areas where there are additional wells that they also require cleaning. But because sometimes there's been overgrowth of bush or the persons have encroached on the land and created spaces where the NHC could not get in, we're in a situation where the 148 may actually be triple that amount in terms of what is urgent. But at least we have started, sir, and I think the message must go that we have started the process, whether it is that in Southeast I have been able to get the start of the program for the wells, or whether it is in the member for St. James South, that she's been able to also get the start of the program in relation to the electrical upgrades. And we are coming to Eden Lodge, and we're coming to Silver Hill and to the other areas. But people must also understand that we do not have the funds to go on a rapid campaign to be able to do everything one time. But as we start to stabilize the economy, the good news is that we are doing the groundwork to assess where the greatest needs are so that we can prioritize. That is what we promised the electorate, and that is what we are going to continue to do, sir. And so I just want to touch on this issue of contractors and the selection of contractors as well, because this is an issue that has plagued us for a number of years. Identifying people who will build and construct houses in communities. I agree with all honourable members. The time has now come where we get real about what it is that we construct for people, whether low income, middle income, it doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, a house is a house. And whether, if we are talking about climate resilience, we have to get serious about our specifications in relation to what we build and how we build. You know, when I encounter people who tell me that their homes have still not been repaired from Hurricane Thomas, it is very worrying, sir, because Barbados has never seen the level of a disaster, and certainly us in recent times in this chamber have not seen that level of disaster that our sister islands have had to face. And I pray that we don't see it. I know we have started to take steps to clean our drains and to debush and to do the things that are necessary to minimize impact. But as we are speaking in this chamber, others in the region have had to brace themselves for the impact of earthquakes. And these are our realities, that our climate has changed, and with it, when we talk about housing, we have to be talking about housing that is resilient as well to the changing weather conditions as well. And so, sir, I want to again support this resolution, but I feel that it is important that we always contextualize. I hear people saying, you know, we have been in office for 18 months and they want us to behave as though we must speak in a way where we forget where we have come from. But sir, I can never forget where I have come from, because I sat in an opposition and I was critical of an administration that did not do its best to make sure that the people at the bottom adequately provided for. And my observations are not meant in any way ever to make anyone feel as though they're not doing the job, but rather to highlight that we must learn from the lessons of the past. And I know that this administration has learned from the lessons of the past. And if it is that we have persons who are not pulling their weight, sir, in relation to making sure that they maintain the plant and the property, well, they need to start to do so. Because I know what it is to go through a tragedy with a mother who loses a child and a family who loses a child, knowing full well that things could have been done to prevent incidents from happening. And I therefore want to urge that those who have the power to be able to plan effectively start to do so, if they have not already done so, sir, to make sure that we can give the necessary ease to the people who are at the bottom of the ladder. Sir, we have submitted, I believe, requests for persons in various areas who also require the eradication of the pit toilet program. Again, another initiative of this administration, sir, that I believe will bring a lot of tremendous relief to a number of households. I encountered a lady a few months ago who broke down in tears. She's only in her 30s, but as the member for St. Michael South spoke to, you know, on the outside, sometimes you look at houses and you don't know what is in the yard. And sir, there are a lot of people who have had to endure in this generation in the last 30 years coming up with outside toilets. As a consequence, sir, we have a responsibility, and we understand our mandate to make sure that while we are engaged in trying to attract tourism development, we also have to be looking at our planning gains. And if it is that we are building out serious planning development, whether in the city or other places, it is what we negotiate, Mr. Speaker. It is what we negotiate that is going to make the difference for our people. Because the last administration was clearly too busy looking at what they could negotiate for themselves. And they spent very little time looking at how to improve the lot of the people who were in the surrounding districts of the development that they were trying to secure. And as a consequence, we have had a lot of frustrated people feeling as though the development really does not impact them. But I want, Mr. Speaker, that the public understands that both through the leadership of this party, but also through the collective minds and the thoughts of the members of this administration, we are clear that when development comes to this country, it also must come not just with a price, but it must come with also a planning gain for the people who must also be in that surrounding area. And we will leave no stone unturned, sir, to ensure that the people get an adequate settlement in terms of being able to improve their conditions. There's no point talking about sky-rise buildings and multi-story buildings and hotels if the people in the surrounding districts, the roads are still in a bad state. If it is that the person still have pit toilets, there is no point, because it means that it does not trickle down to the lowest common denominator, sir. But we have recognized that the way in which things were done, that we've had to learn from the lessons of the past to ensure that our negotiations take place in a manner that is beneficial to all who are concerned. And sir, as I said, I support this resolution. I wish the honorable ministers in the Ministry of Housing well, because I know that they are dealing with some difficult circumstances in terms of meeting the demands of all of the persons who have been applying. I would hope that in the fullest of time, even the issues of the title deeds can be resolved, because people are still asking about the title deeds. Where there are encroachments, I believe that perhaps we need to have conversations with the individuals to see how we can rectify. But the truth be told, sir, the people in a lot of these housing estates created illegal extensions because government was not providing for them. Because all of the promises about even the Coverley project, I remember hearing about Coverley. I remember the Minister of Tourism, the present Minister of Tourism right now, I remember him giving the example of the space that was provided in these units by stretching out his hands, sir. I'm sure you remember that visual, because he creeped in late at night and tiptoed over the fence to see the size of the units. And many of us believed in our heart of hearts that that project was intended for low-income people. That is what was sold to the people of this country, sir. Now, I am glad that the students at Ross and others have been able to benefit from Coverley, but it still pains me to know that for a number of years, the units would have had to sit there without being occupied, and there are people in my community and others in here who were not able to get a look in because you had to be making close to $3,000 in order to qualify to be able to get in there to rent a unit, sir. That's what became the reality. So when you understand the frustrations of people, it is hard, sir, because they're genuinely frustrated when they cannot get access to something as basic as housing. And I want to leave you with this last point, sir. You know, there are many people who have come up hard, come up in difficult situations, and they've risen out of poverty and they've done well for themselves. But what I see in education a lot of times are people, young people who, because of their circumstances and the overcrowding, are finding it very difficult to cope in the social conditions that they're coming up in. And that in itself is creating some other issues in terms of the crime and the issues in terms of incest as well, sir, within the home environment. We've got to be real. These are the things that are happening. You have houses that have been built for 1 or 2 persons now being occupied by 15. You have women or men who may have children from different persons who they're visiting persons coming to the house, and you have young children in the house, and sometimes the children are interfered with, sir, interfered with sexually, sir. These are our realities, and therefore the onus, the pressure is on us as an administration to ensure that we recognize that the ability to create proper housing and to create those incentives for the private sector to be able to invest in housing, whether as a social good, a moral good, or as an investment, sir, is of a paramount importance to this administration, because we recognize that the failure to be able to provide the adequate housing will have a direct impact on our wider society. And that extends to whether we fail to provide proper recreational facilities, sir, for people to go and play or to recreate. The reality is all of these things are interconnected, and we have to be able to ensure that all of the aspects of government are working closely to be able to ease the pressure on a number of households. Sir, my last point would be in relation to the member for St. Thomas, because I know that the welfare department, there are a number of people who seek housing even now, and I would want to make the cry to a number of the landlords, potential landlords, to embrace some of the persons who are seeking accommodation, because the stories I get, sometimes people don't want to embrace persons who are on welfare. Even though welfare is intending to pay for the accommodation, many of them are looking for accommodation which government cannot provide. And sir, I would want to just appeal to the good nature of those landlords, as well as the ministry, to make sure that we have the money to pay the landlords when the persons actually occupy the premises, because it works both ways. But private landlords can also help us to be able to address in the shorter time frame the issues related to housing. So, sir, I support the resolution. I want to thank the honourable member for being so thorough, because I must say that I got accustomed to resolutions being introduced in this chamber by the former minister that only lasted all of 2 seconds. And therefore, he was very thorough in his explanation as to all of the issues that he is encountering in the ministry. And I certainly appreciate the fact that he is giving a wider perspective and certainly a better understanding of what he's dealing with in the Ministry of Housing than certainly this country and certainly this chamber, sir, has become accustomed to. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest.
Yes, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to give my support to this resolution concerning the acquisition of land at Harry Smith St. Philip. Sir, it was very heartbreaking to hear the things the National Housing Corporation had to endure at the hands of the previous government. Mr. Speaker, sir, I nearly cried listening to the member of St. Andrew when he was delivering his speech earlier. And can you begin, Mr. Speaker, sir, to imagine the last government allowing the National Housing Corporation to lose revenue after parting with over 3,000 units, but never put no system in place to replace low-income housing for the poor people in this country. Not a single low-income unit was constructed by the former DLP government, Mr. Speaker, sir. Not one. Can you imagine building high-rise apartments, renting these apartments for $700 a month, Mr. Speaker, sir, to low-income workers who can't afford the rent? That is what the last government did to the low-income people who can't afford to pay high rent when it comes to renting houses in this country. Now tell me, sir, how on God's earth can poor people who work for $250 a week, $350 the most, can pay the government $700 a month in rent, pay bills, buy food, send school their children, sir, and still have money remaining for a rainy day? Can you tell me? Would you consider that to be housing for low-income earners? We have tenants living in housing units, these high-rise apartments, low-income tenants, that just can't afford to pay $700 a month. And please be mindful, Mr. Speaker, sir, that those old housing units that cost $35 and $45 a week are high in demand, but are very limited because the government presently owns just between 800 to 900 of those older units. And it is very sad to see the state that the former government left the National Housing Corporation in. The corporation, sir, to me, is penniless because sometimes when it comes to being able to purchase a door, it's very challenging for the corporation to even do that, or even replace a window in some of those units that are still existing and owned by the government. And I have poor people that come to me every day, either at my office, sir, or even message me about housing units. But what a lot of people don't understand is that because of the program that was brought under the last government, where over 3,000 housing units were given to the tenants, which I have no problem in poor people actually having the privilege to own those units. But the last government did not think or wasn't mindful of putting measures in place that would cover the revenue that was lost after those housing units were given away, sir. And it hurts me, sir, to see the last government could take land and sell it to be used for commercial use in Orange Hill. And honestly, sir, I do not think that was the right thing that the government did, because we have poor people, sir, across this country, the people that the member for St. Andrew will always speak about in White Hill, that need housing. I have people in my constituency that need housing, sir. And to add to that, they take it upon themselves, sir, to lease land in Christchurch for 99 years. And that was land, sir, that could have benefited the poor people in this country. People that work at gas stations and can't afford to pay $700 in rent. Some of the government workers that work for minimum wage and can't afford to pay $700 in rent. That land that was leased for 99 years, sir, would have been perfect to be used for low-income earners, to be used to build low-income houses to benefit the poor people in this country. And I know, sir, that things are very challenging, especially when you have people that are living in these high-rise apartments and are going to NHC, reaching out to other MPs, Mr. Speaker, sir, for transfers to occupy the cheaper units that are for $35 and $45 a week. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, when you see things like that there happening, you could tell yourself that these people are renting units that are above their means. And it's challenging, sir. And I trust that this government and the honorable member for St. Andrew will address the situation. And I honestly want to say to the member for St. Andrew that so far he have done a good job, sir. And I know that as long as he remains the Minister of Housing, that the member for St. Andrew and the member for St. John will correct all of the wrongdoings that have existed under the National Housing Corporation over the last 10 years. Mr. Speaker, sir, would you believe that since the establishment of the Tenantry Freehold Purchase Act, that there are some tenants living on tenantry land who were told under the previous administration that the government don't have any money. So those families or individuals who had made a deposit to purchase the tenantry land was forced to come up with the rest of the money, however they can, to complete the purchase of the land. And I can also tell you, sir, that there is an old lady who lives in Black Rock. She came to me in distress in early 2018. And she said to me that she had paid her deposit to purchase the piece of land where she is presently living with her husband. And when she went to the former representative of St. Michael Northwest and also the former Minister of Finance, he said to her, the government don't have any money, so you can go pay for it, you can go find money to pay for it yourself. And it was heartbreaking to see the old lady in distress and to hear what was said to her by the former representative and the former Minister of Finance. And you want to hear, Joe, Mr. Speaker, sir, that there are a number of families that shared a similar experience that that old lady shared, that live within the constituency of St. Michael Northwest. But what is hurtful, Mr. Speaker, sir, is to see the former Minister of Finance did not tell his friend who had the duty-free concessions to pay the duties that the government need money to help pay or to help assist the poor people to pay the balance of the money that the government is supposed to pay when it comes to purchasing land under the Freehold Tenantry Act. That is the hurtful thing about it, Mr. Speaker, sir. And these are things, sir, that I can honestly say that are wrong. And as a government, sir, we have to be very mindful and to always remember that we have poor people among us that will not be able to afford. And we, as a government, sir, I think it is our duty to really look out for the interests of these poor people who cannot provide for themselves the way that others that can afford will be able to provide. And I can admit, Mr. Speaker, sir, that I know what it feels like to be poor, because I grew up in Black Rock. I had no gold spoon. I grew up in a Rotterdam house at one point. I remember the days of having to go out in the yard, sir, to use a pig toilet. I remember the days, Mr. Speaker, sir, of having to go in the yard and take a shower under a pipe. And Mr. Speaker, sir, there are families in my constituency that are still living under those conditions. And I think that it is our duty to really help make a difference in the lives of those people, sir. And I have the utmost confidence in the Minister of Housing and also the Member of Parliament for St. John, that they will do whatever it takes to make round things right within the National Housing Corporation and to make round things right in the lives of the people that continue to live in inhumane conditions in this country. And I know, sir, that some of the wicked deeds that some of my constituents had to endure under the former representative, I can honestly tell you that as a child growing up, I had a little interaction with the late Lawson Weeks. And he was one, sir, that I could tell you would have never done that to his constituents at that point in time. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I am not ashamed to say that I will take a leaf out of his book, because it is my aim to remain there for my constituents and to remain there with them all the way. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I know that this resolution will benefit the poor people within my constituency, and I want to endorse it 150%, sir, because I know that I have poor people, some that are still living in housing units and having between 10 to 11 or 12 relatives living in these units. Sir, I mean, it's hard. because there's no way that you could have 12 relatives, mother, children, grandchildren, sometimes great-grandchildren, living in a 2 or 3 bedroom unit, sir. It can be easy, sir. And this is one of the reasons, sir, that I support this resolution, because I know that opportunities will be created under the National Housing Corporation, especially for those families that live in under those circumstances, that they will be able to embrace, better housing solutions that I know that the member for St. Andrew and the member for St. John will create, not only for my people to benefit, but for the people across Barbados. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to conclude by saying that I hope that the lands that are presently available within my constituency between Deacon's Court and Rosemont, and also Lord Deacon's Road, I trust and hope that both ministers, whenever the resources become available, and hopefully within this first 5 years, that both ministers will look at utilizing those lands to increase housing for the poor people in this country. I thank you, sir.
All member for St. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too raise to support the resolution before this honorable place. And in doing so, Mr. Speaker, I want to associate myself with the comments of those who have spoken before me. Mr. Speaker, the current Minister of Housing, and of course, the honorable member for St. Andrew, between the period of 1994 to 1999, acquired a lot of land in Barbados. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I would say that he acquired hundreds of acres of land in Barbados. And after he left there, the Honorable Deputy Speaker of this House, the Honorable Member for St. George North, continued in a similar vein to execute a mandate of a former Barbados Labour Party government. And I would say this, not only in here, sir, but outside, that it was perhaps one of the most visionary moves made. And therefore, I have to give credit to the honorable member for St. Andrew for his foresight and vision in moving to acquire hundreds of acres of land. At a time, Mr. Speaker, when there were some no longer in this place, but who would have been opposed to the government, the then government of the day, acquiring lands. But, Mr. Speaker, the acquisition of such lands, the acquisition of lands continue to build out town centers in this country, and also to develop housing solutions for Barbadians. But, Mr. Speaker, I take it at this very critical juncture, with a new government in place, a new Barbados Labour Party government in place, that we must now use those lands that we have acquired and continue to acquire to house the poor, the vulnerable in this society. Mr. Speaker, I believe it falls to this Parliament to use lands now as a vehicle to propel housing development as a public good, Mr. Speaker. And I say that, sir, because, like you, sir, we represent constituencies in the St. Michael area. And within the St. Michael area, and certainly I speak for the residents of St. Michael West Central, Mr. Speaker, there is a demand. As long as I'm in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, every Thursday, I have a constituency clinic. And can I tell you, sir, and I do not believe it's too dissimilar from your position too, sir, and that of the Honourable Member for St. Michael North too, that you are faced with demands from constituents for housing. There are people who would come to me and say that they've been to the National Housing Corporation, they've been going there for many years, or that they were registered for many years, and they need a housing solution. So when I say, I believe at this juncture, it falls to this Barbados Labour Party government to use the lands that we have acquired as a vehicle, an investment vehicle, an opportunity for housing, because it is a very real issue, Mr. Speaker. But I will even go further, sir, and that there are lands that have been acquired all over Barbados, and that they have been acquired in our constituencies. And I believe perhaps we need to have a new approach to how we execute new housing, low-income housing, I may add, arrangements. I believe, sir, that the time has come for us to jumpstart housing in each constituency for low-income earners, sir. And when I say low-income earners, sir, I mean people who cannot afford to go to a bank and get a mortgage. But, Mr. Speaker, those who work hard and they have to fork out maybe $800, $1,000, or $1,200 in rent every month. But they can pay the rent, sir, but they don't have the opportunity for that start. And I believe that we now must have a new investment vehicle, a special purpose vehicle, to create institutions, sir, for us to create and for us to satisfy, sir, the housing demand that is now before us. Mr. Speaker, we had, I believe, and the Honourable Member for St. Thomas can correct me, I believe it was a former member for St. Thomas who served in this honourable chamber, but also served this country as a Prime Minister, who would have helped to build out the Barbados Mortgage Finance Corporation. And building out the Barbados Mortgage Finance Corporation, that created opportunities for lower and middle income persons. And as a result of that facility, a lot of Barbadians who own homes today did so because they were able to go to an institution like the Barbados Mortgage Finance Corporation and acquire a loan to start the process of building out for, not only for themselves, sir, but also for their families, to give them that start. And there are some people who went there, perhaps had a 20-year mortgage, and some people then go and apply for a mortgage at 20 or 30. There's some people who went there and got a mortgage at 40. In St. James South, for example, what they refer to as the Venezuelan housing project. There are a lot of Barbadians who would have gone to the Barbados Mortgage Finance Corporation. They might be classified as low and or middle income earners at the time. But they went and they got a loan, and some of those persons today may now be enjoying their second home, sir. So I believe that we need to take an approach similar to what obtained in the past to propel housing development in this country. Mr. Speaker, I also believe, and particularly so for low-income persons, and especially those who sent me to this Parliament, sir, perhaps the time has come for us to consider a Provident Housing Fund. And when I say a Provident Housing Fund, Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about a fund to support low-income development and low-income housing, sir. A fund that would allow those who can afford to pay rent but do not have the deposit to start the mortgage, that those persons can be accommodated in a low income. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the square feet, and if you use an example maybe of an apartment or a house, and if you calculate what they're paying per square foot, Mr. Speaker, you have to extend that into mortgage, sir, mortgage payment, I think there's no harm there. But to access mortgages in this country sometimes, sir, it is often denied, poor people are often denied, because of their inability, sir, to source the required deposit. They can pay the rent, sir, but they cannot source the initial deposit. A Provident Housing Fund, Mr. Speaker, with a transfer, what we refer to as a housing transfer mechanism, designed to help those who wish to own their own homes and eventually transfer such homes to their families, I believe can be arranged. Let me give you an example, Mr. Speaker. I have constituents who are younger than 50 and older than 50. But I give you an example, sir, of a 50-year-old. If you're 50 years old, you can afford to pay $1,200 in rent, Mr. Speaker, every month. Based on your household or individual income, you can afford to pay the rent, sir. And if you can afford to pay the rent, by extension, you are able to satisfy the mortgage payment. However, sir, because sometimes of the remaining age to retirement, the difference between your current age and the retirement age, that period, there's sometimes you're faced with a situation where persons cannot satisfy a loan or satisfy a financial institution to purchase their own homes. So, Mr. Speaker, what is the solution? With a Provident Housing Fund, you would allow the person or persons to take a mortgage at the current rental rate or equivalent to the current rental rate that they're paying for the remaining years of their employment to retirement. Upon retirement, Mr. Speaker, the mortgage will be adjusted at an agreed rate because you'll be moving into a pension, sir. But if you have a joint arrangement with a spouse or with your children, for example, because, you know, they have spouses living home and they have their children too, and they might be contributing because, you know, not a lot of us sometimes like to leave our mothers and fathers' homes, sir. We like to stay there for a long time. That's not the situation, sir, with you, sir. But upon retirement, the mortgage could be adjusted, right, to allow the retiree either to continue to pay at a lower rate, or if you don't want to adjust it, you will, for the retiree, you can adjust the rate for those able-bodied persons who are still working and away from retirement. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, the mortgage that you have, sir, invariably, God forbid, should anything happen, the property would be bequeathed to your family or to some person within, or your children, sorry. And they too can continue to pay the original sum. So that's when I say we would have to look, and I'm not a lawyer, sir, I will have to look to you or the honorable member for St. Michael North to advise me and to say if this is possible or not. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that a housing transfer mechanism can be arranged through a Provident Housing Fund. So, Mr. Speaker, this would allow us to build out low-income housing. And, Mr. Speaker, there are several ways where you can execute and secure funding, sir, at concessional rates, Mr. Speaker. And I'm sure that there are several such opportunities out there. But I would wish, sir, for us to take a strategic approach to the promotion and development of low-income housing, sir, constituency by constituency, because the country will benefit. But in an area like St. Michael, for example, in St. Michael West Central, if I were able, sir, to identify lands, and we have lands that I can identify, and we can say, like, I will have to check with housing and see, like, was this acquired? And if it is acquired, then that also presents an opportunity for a government to either transfer the land into such a fund or to assist with a low-income mechanism, financing mechanism, to build out. But I firmly believe that we don't necessarily have to build as we did in the past because we had a lot of lands then. Like in Eden Lodge, you might be able to build maybe 40 on a stretch. You may not have the opportunity now. But if in my constituency, St. Michael West Central, and I can perhaps identify areas where I may be able to build 4 in Weston, 4 in Ulster Road, 20 in Fairfield, 40 in Long Gap, 10 in Rock Gap, and collectively have maybe enough housing solutions within the area, sir. I think it will go a long way. So I started out by making the point that the Minister of Housing, the Honourable Member St. Andrew, did an excellent job, sir, in acquiring the land. I think over time, sir, the last administration failed to achieve a housing goal and or its housing objectives. But it falls to us, sir, on this occasion, to find the mechanisms. And we are creative and we are smart as a government, and the people sent us here to govern and to manage their affairs. And I believe that they're happy in the way we're going about managing the affairs, sir. But all we need to do now is to take some of those lands and convert them to low-income housing. Mr. Speaker, before I conclude, I also wish to thank the government for the initiative regarding the electrical upgrades within the housing estates, as it's referred to. Mr. Speaker, you know, in St. Michael West Central, I have quite a few. I have Weston, I have Ulster Road, I have Denton Road, Denton housing area, Mr. Speaker. I have Lattice Lane, I have Trellis Walk, I have Kildare Close, Brecon Road, Mr. Speaker, and Antrim Close. And I want to say, sir, that I know that the ministry will get to those areas because it's part of a broader housing program. But the electrical upgrade, sir, is a wonderful move. It is about safety and security. It is about ensuring that a Barbados Labour Party that continues to care for the people of Barbados not only say so in words, Mr. Speaker, but they have done so by the very action of putting aside funding to start with the electrical upgrade project. Mr. Speaker, the issue of wells, sir, and I'm happy that, because this is a problem as well, I'm happy that monies were allocated to support this initiative. And I think that such initiatives will go a long way, Mr. Speaker, in satisfying, and I speak here on behalf of the residents of St. Michael West Central, to satisfy the residents of St. Michael West Central, and by extension, all of Barbados. So really, Mr. Speaker, in closing, would want to ensure that our government continues on the path we're on, but that we address the issue of housing, low-income housing, Mr. Speaker, in short time. And we have the lands and we have the mechanisms to create housing opportunities, because such opportunities will go a long, long way. I know we are starting, Mr. Speaker, on the back foot because few houses were built on the last administration, and also there were issues with the quality of housing. But, Mr. Speaker, the Barbados Labour Party has never had a poor record of constructing units for lower-income people. We have an outstanding record, Mr. Speaker, and we've done wonderful things for the people of Barbados. So in closing, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honourable Minister, the Honourable Member for St. John, and his, Minister of State in the ministry as well, St. John, Minister in the ministry, so I should rephrase that, the Honourable Member for St. John, because they work together, and the Honourable Member for St. Andrew. And I am confident that they will, this is not the first, not the second, but there are several other initiatives that I'm sure that combination will bring here to this honourable chamber in support of housing initiatives, especially for low-income Barbadians. And on that note, Mr. Speaker, I'm much obliged.
Honourable Member St. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to add my commendations to the two honourable ministers in the Ministry of Housing, Rural and Urban Development for bringing this resolution today. I know that many of the other honourable members who have made their contribution ahead of me would have spoken to the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act. And while I cannot boast of having any housing units at all, thank God, because I know the challenges that have come with them and the burdens that those residents and the members of parliament and families have been experiencing, I can boast of the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act across the length and breadth of rural Barbados and the empowerment that they have received as a result of the vision of a Barbados Labour Party between 1976 and right through the ages since then, where we have seen developments in those communities at that 10 cents per square foot land blossom. Some of the biggest and most beautiful houses, and many of them are still having agricultural lots assigned or joined to them, which says they are helping to feed themselves. And I think that is really very critical. I also want, Mr. Speaker, to say that it was such a dynamic and a most phenomenal initiative because it provided an element of ownership for those persons who worked on the plantation lands and their children or their offspring to be able to acquire some measure of comfort rather than the chattel house that all four parents had to take up and leave whenever they left those plantations, even for one day to go somewhere else to get a few more dollars or a few more cents at that time in their hands. So I thought that that was one of the most important things in our history within the 20th century. I do not know who has given the audacity to those members of the Democratic Labour Party who sat in this chamber, sir, and without thought did some of the worst aspects of development in this country. I can't even call it development because it was such a retrograde step. First, this Barbados Labour Party was heavily criticized that we have land banks, but if you have land banks, you can't do anything before the government changed in 2008. And when we thought that the lands that were accumulated would have been used to help to provide shelter for the thousands of Barbadians who required, because at one point in time we knew that the numbers making requests at the National Housing Corporation were over 30,000. We heard today that there are approximately 20,000 people, and I believe that the numbers may not be so large still because the private sector has also been providing housing. We appreciate, yes, that they're doing housing, but sometimes those houses are more expensive, and therefore as many people who will want to require them would not have the access. But however, we were so heavily criticized, and we saw what to me was an element of madness when the administration came and they were opening up a place in St. Philip and keys were being dangled at people, and a whole Sunday evening was taken up on CBC and champagne to give keys to people. When some of them received the keys, they said, but we did not even apply. And it was just friends and families receiving those keys, and people who really needed housing to help to put a shelter over their heads and that of their children never were recognized. So I must tell you, sir, that we, the people of St. Thomas, were never privileged to get not even a standpipe. As a matter of fact, some of the standpipes were taken up. Furthermore, house spot or a road. And it therefore confuses me as to what did the DLP do, because you will appreciate, sir, and I'm sure you will share with me, that the last Minister of Housing was the worst travesty that could ever happen to Barbados when it came to the housing and to deliver those houses to the people who mattered. It is a sad, sad story in our history. But I would want to use my time more wisely, sir, and to just remind the public that we heard when the government changed in 2008, fancy 14 years and not a house. And some of the people who were in the distinguished chamber, sir, and in the other place, were some of the major ones who were trumpeting that, when indeed and in fact some of them had acquired houses through the Barbados Labour Party and the sites and services, through mortgage finance, through the credit unions, through the housing credit fund that was established that helped many, many poor people. And the one I loved the most would have been the General Workers Fund that poor people who had houses, who wanted to extend them, would have been able to borrow a 5,000 or 10,000 to build on the bathroom, the water toilet, to be able to put on a step or two, to be able to change the roof. And the last Democratic Labour Party institution, Mr. Speaker, sir, destroyed all of that facility, and the poor people of Barbados had to be going. They're even going out to some other ethnic groups who are helping to give house tops and bringing the sand and the bricks and so, because that is the way that they can only eke out the little bit when the week or when the month comes to be able to put a shelter over their heads. I want for this government, sir, when the economy improves, to bring back that housing credit fund and that general workers fund to be able to help poor people. There are still thousands of individuals out there who require that help because they've got families, they're investing in education, they're investing in transportation, and they really would require that kind of help, that kind of fillip to help to stabilize them and their households. I am requesting, sir, sites and services for St. Thomas. I do not want any housing units. The housing units serve people who are living in other communities. It is not the culture of our rural people, but I'm not condemning it, because once you can get a good housing unit, you can be able to still live a comfortable life. And I agree with what the Honorable Minister and Leader of Government Business said. Those houses were built for husband and wife or partners and a child or two. But then when it escalates where the children can find nowhere to live, but they too are having their own children, you end up with 10 and 15 people in that same space. And therefore it creates quite some challenges for the households and for the families as well. So I still have my eyes on Kingsland in Spring Farm and Exchange near Hangman's Hill for me to be able to get some sites and services. I could call till my eyes turn blue. Not a single piece of assistance was offered to me in St. Thomas to be able to make a difference to my people. I always praise just that little bit to the then minister who was housing minister before, when a formal request was made on 40 acres was acquired, 47 lots. And to this day, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am waiting to hear who in St. Thomas got. Not even the people living in 40 acres who were dwelling within the environs of their family homes, who applied for those spots, did not get a spot. I pray that all of them have not really been gone, and I'll rely on the honorable ministers to help to guide me through the process, because we have people living in Allen View who cannot develop their lands. I have been calling and trumpeting this for many years, and those who would have been holding this position previous to me. Those folks who are living in Allen View are near the cave. They are still crying out for water, and they want the Honorable Minister for the Water Authority to please look at it. And I can't blame him either, because he's just come. But there was a plan where there was an IDB project, the Housing Neighborhood Upgrades, where millions of dollars were allocated in that budget. It was $30 million US or 60 million Barbados dollars for the folk of Allen View to get that opportunity for the sewage plant to be put in place to avoid the water and the other elements going into the cave to impact on the stalagmites and the stalactites. Nobody in Allen View benefited, Your Honor. Nobody from that money. Nor did the people of Cass Castle, who are still struggling in the city. Nor were the people from Greenfield, who when the rain falls, they get flooded out. Nor did the people from the Garden Land, sir, which I understand is in your area. And so, as a result of only spending $13 million, and perhaps we would need to get the Public Accounts Committee to investigate, where did that $13 million go? Because the 4 communities that were assigned did not benefit as a result. And it was a project, Your Honor, that was identified, conceptualized by the former member for the city, the Dame, and then when the government changed in 2008, January, the then administration of the Democratic Labour Party was able to go and sign on the dotted line in March, less than 2 months after, so you know how mature that project was. And the people of Barbados, as a matter of fact, don't let me say the people of Barbados, those people for whom that project was conceived never received assistance. And it pains me when they did not meet the conditionalities for the 6-year period of the loan to be able to look after the people and their needs. $47 million were sent back to the IDB. It really is a disgraceful part of what happened in this country, and we must not let it rest. I also want to say, sir, and I agree that I have my full support for this resolution, that I think that this government needs to go back again. You know, sometimes you do things, you start things, you don't get the opportunity to complete them, but when you step back and you see the vision unfolding, you want to be able to go forward and tackle it again. I am asking, sir, that the two honorable ministers, with the guidance of the cabinet, will again look at the derelict project, where UDC, the Urban Development Commission, and RDC, and the workers had gone across the length and breadth of Barbados, particularly in the urban corridor, and identify house spots and sometimes derelict housing that nobody lived in, nobody cleaned them. The houses were falling down. The government had to go and demolish them. And to this day, nothing has happened. Yes, some of them may be disputes in the court, but those that are not, once families can be found and they can agree we will lease this land, that will help to resolve some of the challenges that we are having in the country. And there are people who will take the lease, an annual lease, whatever, to be able then for government to help or for the persons to build the houses. And I believe a lease will be like a 20-year lease or whatever, so that housing will be made available for Barbadians to be able again to live their quality life. So the criticisms about the land bank, let me throw that behind me. I also want, Mr. Speaker, to indicate that the community component of projects of this nature is what I love. I have only been a country girl for my whole life, and I will never be an urban girl. And therefore, I have lived and seen our parents, our neighbors.
I didn't hear that, so I don't remember.
Your Honor, that's okay. I think the honorable member who is speaking is partially a millionaire and might be want to give me a house, and I will accept. But that was all that I will be giving, sir, acceptance verbally. And, sir, it so happened that as children growing up, our parents built from the back and went forward. And that was a creative way, and I agree with the honorable member for St. George South, who spoke about using community artisans and so to do the building. I know that many of our contractors, especially those who are more upstanding now, came through the training between 1994 and 2008, and we saw them rise from being simple, ordinary artisans and contractors until they became professional and became subcontractors and so. And I believe we need to get back to that level. Many of those artisans have been out of employment for so long. They need the training, how to use the technology, how to bring in other persons to give the advice in areas where they don't have the expertise, and make sure that they stick to the building codes that are required in order to go forward. Now, Mr. Speaker, I went to the area in St. Philip previously, and I believe that the government has gone ahead to be able to ensure that not only those folk in St. Philip, in the Rock Hall area, but indeed there are many other areas in Barbados where persons require to be relocated because of where they have placed their houses. Even in the rural Barbados, people are putting houses in watercourses. They're putting them in gullies. They're squatting all over the place. Sometimes the land is theirs, but not the land. If the land is theirs, it won't be squatting, but the land is not theirs. And so it creates bigger problems if there are heavy rains and so on to block the watercourse. Then you're talking about flooding and all that. And I believe, sir, that we need to stick to the building code and wherever possible strengthen the town planning department, because as soon as people start to put up the structures, they must be taken down if we are to avoid a repetition of some of what we've seen across the island as a whole. And when I saw those persons, the first thing I said to them, you are so close to this airport. Tourism is our major earner. And any travesty at all at the airport, our economy is dead. We can't pay for our children to go back to university. We won't be able to get the buses, the garbage trucks. We will not be able to have the health institutions strengthened. Our schools will, once that happens, and therefore, all of them with whom we communicated said, we understand, but we couldn't do better. But what it must cost on Barbadians, a lot of people keep saying they're foreigners in the majority. There are many Barbadians who are living in that location, and there are Barbadian children as a result of the unions in Rock Hall. I saw it, I know it, and I found it to be most accommodating, but it is unfortunate because where they are living, access to water, access to light, and then the environs that are not in keeping with the standards of Barbados and will create health issues, those are the problems. And so I would support not only them, but others in the communities that would have been suffering before. I would support government assisting them in moving forward, but they will have to give funding towards the aspect of the building and where they are going for proper sites and services to be put in place so they have access to water. That water business, Mr. Speaker, sir, is a niggling problem. There are people who've been living, and we saw one in the newspaper early this week. People are living in houses. Those who were living in them before never had the water attached. Now they're being told, bring a water bill or bring a land tax paper. The persons who own the land are now dead. I have houses in St. Thomas that have 10 and 15 people living in them, but there is no landlord. The landlord is long dead. There was no will or anything, but they cannot get water attached. But they get the light. They get the telephone, and as a result of that, people are suffering. If they have to be running and begging a neighbor and paying for water and they can't get the utility to be able to make themselves comfortable and live a healthy life in the way they would like, well, then that needs to be urgently addressed if we are to go forward. There are sewage matters that will affect that area in St. Philip and the other areas, and we need to get cracking on that, and I want to really lend my support to this resolution. I also want to say, Mr. Speaker, that you are aware that I am a strong proponent of supporting people and their rights. Once people have rights, I don't care what color, class, or creed they belong to, they are human beings, and that whole humanitarian approach should be extended to them. And when we look at it, who are the persons who are disenfranchised? Only today, Your Honor, I left this chair because a young woman with 3 small children, a baby 15 months, was evicted. Where will she go with her children? And when we have land slippage, and we have flooding and all that, there are people who become displaced. That last administration gave away every single house, and there's no facility for any person who becomes displaced as a result of the land slippage or the flooding or fire or anything. And then the welfare is expected to pay. But the other travesty now, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that when the persons go to the welfare officer is not going to go around to look for a house for me or any member in here or anybody else. That individual then has to undertake that hard exercise of going and looking, because the welfare department, once you bring the details, they will want to facilitate. And in most instances, according to the information reaching me, the welfare department will pay X amount of dollars maximum to be able to facilitate persons, and it's usually a good amount. The point is, whenever these individuals now, especially with children or senior citizens, go to the landlords, some landlords say, I don't want any children in my house, and they probably are right. I don't want children marking up my walls, or destroying the plumbing, or destroying my wardrobe, or doing whatever, because once you have children, you have to supervise. So this is a word to those families who want to be able to do rentals. Just make sure you supervise the children properly. We have to sit in our household and make sure we use our hands to do a little knitting with coconut bones. Our parents can afford to buy knitting needles. Or sit down and draw and do a little fantasizing, dressing up and painting and so on our paper with our crayons. But a lot of the landlords said, I am not going to rent my house to anybody with children. Children are God's precious gift. And I'm not grumbling with the landlords because they have their own responsibilities to have to paint over the house or refurbish the cupboards or whatever. But that is really one of the real walls that is blocking people from getting access to housing in the way that we would like. And therefore, were some of those houses still in reserve and some of that land over in farmers, for persons to be able, once they got dislocated with the slippage and so, to put up the houses or in the housing units that were there to facilitate persons who suffer as a result. The last administration gave away all of them, now to the detriment of those poor people who don't have family that can facilitate them, because those families are big too, and therefore there is no space. So we really have to look at a more comprehensive approach to be able to look at what is happening in those areas. I also want to, Mr. Speaker, remind that whenever the construction is going, as a government, we also need to look at having water tanks on our houses to capture the rainwater for the flushing of the toilets and other things, not for drinking water as such. I think it is either Cayman or Bermuda that kind of project is in vogue, and I believe that once that is done, it will help, because only on the radio this morning I heard of the year 2019 as one of the most water scarce areas in Barbados, and this year it is beginning to look similarly. So if government is going to have to relocate these persons, some of them have no water at all and rely on the regular system, I think it is important that we also, in our plans for the Barbados Water Authority, to look at the sinking of more wells, pumping stations, I should say, or reservoirs, to be able to meet that demand once those groups of people go, 50 houses or so, wherever they are going to be constructed, that they will be properly facilitated in this whole respect. I also want, Mr. Speaker, sir, to step back to the whole idea of entrepreneurship, those contractors and those builders and so on, and to admonish the youth to go to learn a skill. In most other countries across the world, Mr. Speaker, academics learn a skill too. We can have the biggest degree in law, teaching, accounts, whatever. When we have a burst pipe in our house, and we don't know what is a wrench, and we don't know what is a piece of PVC, we still have to wait for those persons. They're extremely important people in our society. And therefore, we need to have some form of training, whether it be in the afternoon, in the evening, at the polytechnic or private institutions that will provide that kind of training, so that many of us in here could at least go and learn an additional course so that we can help ourselves and help our families as well. It would not be only fixing your own pipe, but when you have your mother, your sister, especially your ailing parents and so, and they have the burst mains and the other challenges, as artisans, they can learn it. As a matter of fact, when my son attended the Polytechnic, he did a mechanical engineering course and came out being a part of mixing motorcycles and doing a little plumbing and doing things of that nature, to be able to apply it in his own life, as well all the other young people across the island. So I believe that if we go to provide that training for the small contractors, the joiners, the carpenters, and so on, we will go a long way. I remember, sir, when we were working on the World Cup in 2007, there were artisans who came in from India who were training Barbadians certain aspects of the skills that they had for Kensington Oval. And that thing created a furor. I believe that that kind of training and our locals patterning them, they would have been able to pick up those skills as well, and then become trainers of other trainers to be able, or trainers of trainees, to be able for that skill to be spreading across the length and breadth of Barbados, and you wouldn't have to worry about the importing of such a skill. So we need to do a little more and step down from where we are on our pedestal sometimes and see if we can do other things that will help us to be able to upgrade ourselves. I also want, sir, for whatever the building codes are to be conformed with, and to have proper oversight when it comes to building. You know, sometimes you hire workmen even with our schools for repairs and other institutions that have repairs happening. And we have a technical officer or someone who will be there, but there are snags. And sometimes those snag lists are never followed through. I remember going to an institution when we were doing EduTech, and I'm not going to identify the name of the corporation or even the ethnicity of those who were building, but the sink would be here where this microphone would have been, and the pipe where that water should be going is over here. Nothing running in the sink. And workers were going there all the time. The installation happened and nobody said anything. And I, not being a builder, was able to make a big fuss, as you know I would, till the sink would be sitting, the pipe would be sitting to fall into the sink when the tap is turned on. It was that ridiculous, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, we need to have persons who will do proper oversight, because when the taxpayers' money is spent, it is really important for us to be able to account for it in a proper manner. Mr. Speaker, sir, I also want to indicate that the mortgage finance served that critical role, especially with the 100% mortgage. And of course, mortgage finance would have left us and gone off with the new bank that has bought it over. But we need a Barbadian mortgage finance for Barbadians, again, especially our young people who are so enthusiastic. They're now developing the culture of the young people overseas. As soon as they reach a certain age, they want to go to live by themselves or live with their husbands or their partners, and they're moving out. And that element of ownership is really, really very critical. And therefore, once they are working and they can meet the demands, if they can buy the car, they can also look towards investing in their own homes. Yes, the country can only hold so many houses because it's not going to get any bigger, and therefore I agree too that we perhaps require going on 2 stories or 3 stories, whatever, to be able to accommodate a larger mass of families to be able to go forward. I also, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, want to say that the oversight that I spoke about just now is associated too with something that I have been seeing happening in Barbados. And I've got some constituents who have bought houses from private sector. I bought a house from the private sector during the time of the Labour Party as a government, and that house was a turnkey solution. I had to do absolutely nothing with that house but to turn the key, go in and live. Water is in place. They only had a telephone, of course. Nowadays, people are buying houses. We're having spent $200,000 and $300,000 for a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom house. They then have to put in tiles and cupboards and steps and all kinds of strange things that I would say the house is a shell. And I therefore believe that if we are going to be attracting public-private sector projects, let the people have a whole house. The worst thing is to go out and buy a house now too and not have a water tank with the house, because then the people go for a mortgage for X amount of dollars, and then they're living in an area they did not know before the water outages and the challenges. They then have to go and invest in a pump and a tank. I want to see houses that are turnkey solutions to help those persons, because when you have to go pay all that money for the shell of the house, and then you have to install your own cupboards, put in your own tiles, build your own handrails and so on, it is an additional pressure. And the final aspect of it is, I supported a resolution here in the Democratic Labour Party's manifesto of 2008. It spoke to VAT relief for first-time home owners up to $400,000. And I believe in the legislation it was dropped to $150,000. But when my constituents speak to me, they have a petition that they're going to send up, because when they wrote in asking to be able to get the relief from the VAT for the houses because they were more than $150,000, they received letters coming from the VAT office telling them, sorry, you did not you are not the beneficiary, because the person who built the house is the person who is drawing that VAT relief of a maximum of $150,000 at every single house. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am not in favor of that at all, because those persons are relying on getting that VAT-free amount to be able to help them then to finish retrofit the, not retrofit, but to finish outfit the house that they would have bought. And therefore, it really is a tremendous pressure on these young people. I pray that this project and other projects of this nature will help us to see people more empowered and taking pride in ownership, as we have, or the persons of my generation and just before me, and some still with the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act. And finally, I want to admonish every individual. You may not be able to have an insurance policy for the stove or the television set, but have an insurance policy on the house. And I believe if the agencies are the ones who are going to be financing it, well, then the insurance will be a component of it. But if people build their houses themselves, many of them they don't pursue to have it insured properly, or some of them don't have the wherewithal, and therefore, I like what some insurance policies, some insurance companies are doing. They're telling you can pay for 10 months for your insurance, for your car, for your house, and so on. So the smaller installments, they can accommodate. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to close for the Honourable Minister on my left and the Honourable Minister immediately in front of me, sir, to know that I need sites and services in St. Thomas. And I'm going to repeat for the record, sir, Kingsland in Spring Farm, Endeavour near to Jukes and going over to Hangman's Hill. It is Rabland. The only thing that is growing there is bush, and in between you find a body or two. It is so desolate, and an environment, or I don't know if desolate is the right word right now, but I'm so impassioned about that, because over the last 15 years, I have not had a single house except for private houses or private institution building or individuals building from the back and coming forward to be able to improve what they want to do. I commend and highly commend the Honourable Ministers in the Ministry of Housing and Land for bringing this initiative, and I pray that those persons who will benefit will continue to live within the standards that are required, ensuring that when they move into their new homes, if the Lord spares our lives, that they put their little flower gardens and their little kitchen gardens, that they too can feed their family and cut down on the import bill with this high amount of millions of dollars that we have to pay for vegetables and other foods that we eat, that we can grow right here in Barbados to feed ourselves and to feed our families. And so, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank you for your patience and for giving me the opportunity.
Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I shall not be long. I did not intend to speak. I'm saying that not just to you, that's an aside to my esteemed leader of government business. But the people in St. Peter told me that I have to share just a couple of their concerns, because they hear other representatives sharing concerns and they do not want to be left out, especially on the eve of a good big celebration that we are planning for February. This is St. Peter, taking the baton from St. Lucie. The people of St. Peter support housing resolutions that speak, and this one in particular, that speaks to both housing for people, but also economic development. Because we recognize that there must be a thrust to ensure that people get jobs and that the economy grows. We know, we use the term from time to time, that a rising tide will float all the boats. And so we support the resolution. It is on the other side of the island from us, but we support it nonetheless. That said, Mr. Speaker, we have a few concerns, and we acknowledge both the work and the difficulty that the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, who is my neighbor, constituency neighbor, and the honorable member for St. John find themselves in, given what has transpired in the period before we came into office. We recognize that there are some challenges. We've come in on a difficult wicket, so to speak, and so the kind of work in terms of developing solutions, housing solutions, that people in Black Bess and Mangrove, for example, would want. Because like I've said before, in Black Bess and Mangrove, we have a tight community. People in that community want to live in the community. We believe that there is available land around on the Mangrove side, which is on the north side going eastward, before you get into Rock Hall and into the honorable member's constituency. And we would like some attention paid to the possibility of acquiring some land for housing in the Black Bess and Mangrove area. The main reason, though, why I stood to contribute, there is a matter in St. Peter, and I'm sure it is not limited to St. Peter. There are a number of houses that, when I think about them every day, I go to sleep concerned. And it is because, and this is no fault of the Ministry of Housing, this is how the land was developed. There are houses in St. Peter, and like I said, I believe across the country, that have no access. There's no access by emergency vehicles, no possible access. That worries me, especially in situations where there are persons who are incapacitated in some way. People who are amputees, and I can think of one situation that causes me a lot of concern. And that's one of the reasons why I could not allow, even though I didn't want to prolong the debate, but I needed to mention that we have to find some way. And I know that the solution is probably not an easy one, but we have to find some way of creating spaces where there's already housing, but it may call for doing what we don't like to do in a whimsical manner, and that is compulsorily acquiring. Now, the reason why I am saying that is because I am aware that there are some landowners who have people living, I don't know what you say in town, but in the country still living behind them. And there is no access. And some of those landowners, and I'm speaking very clear and very frank because some of them I believe have voted for me, but I'm concerned about lives. There are some people who live at the front with people living at the back, and who seem not to be as caring as they ought to be about providing some kind of access for people who live behind. Not to give away your land, but to recognize that there may from time to time be occurrences when there needs to be some kind of access, some kind of quick, urgent access. And right now, there are too many of those situations where there is no provision for access. So you will have a situation where two people, two orderlies, two emergency technicians, emergency ambulance technicians, will have to be using a stretcher and going across an area that doesn't have a street light, where the terrain is not smooth, and they will have to bring out a person to an ambulance. We have to do two things. One is to appeal to the good nature and to the good hearts of Barbadians who are living, as I described, at the front, to allow for some kind of access for people who live behind them. And secondly, if that doesn't work, because sometimes moral suasion doesn't always work, if moral suasion doesn't work, then to protect life and limb, a government has to take some kind of action. And then I think then we have to impress upon those in those situations to carve out some kind of access so that people can lay down and sleep comfortably at night. And I believe that that is something that we really have to put our minds to, because as the caring government that we are interested in people, we are interested in their welfare, and we are concerned whenever there's a potential situation that could cause harm. Mr. Speaker, I would want to conclude by urging that I think maybe the Honorable Member for St. Andrew and St. John members should probably give us some guidance, because there are areas in all of our constituencies, but in St. Peter, that's the one I'm speaking about, where we need to maybe identify those areas that we want the relevant ministers to look at to see if there's a possibility of acquiring. I spoke to Black Bess and Mangrove. There's also the situation in Indian Ground, and that is both a concern for myself and the honorable member for St. Andrew. I am happy that we are making progress on the matter of land in the Six Mains area. That has been an outstanding issue for a long time. I've seen, and I want to commend the honorable member for St. Andrew, I've seen significant progress. He has provided information that indicates that his ministry has done significant research. I know because he has shared it with me where we are in terms of the legal arguments. I also want to commend the Honorable Prime Minister, the honorable member for St. Michael Northeast, for moving the process forward as well and assigning a colleague to negotiate with the family. I am happy that there has been progress and there continues to be progress on that matter, and I want to assure the residents of Six Mains that this Barbados Labour Party is a party interested in people, is a party that wants people to be able to live comfortably and to produce at their maximum, because they recognize that as a country, we're on the same page. We have their interests at heart, they have the country's interests at heart, and together we can move this country forward. And so, Mr. Speaker, I just want again to support this resolution and to commend it to this honorable chamber.
Honorable Member for St. Andrew.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank all those members who participated in this debate. Certainly, the level of debate today has been a little bit more extensive than we had thought, because at one stage, the leader of the House was wondering whether or not we would close at lunchtime. But I don't want to go on seeing that there are other resolutions that we have to deal with a little later. But there are a few concerns of members that I think I should mention. If I may take the last first, the concern of the honourable member for St. Peter with respect to lots in St. Peter. Well, we know that St. Peter has had its fair share in the past. And I know that being a new member of Parliament, he certainly would like to make his mark in the same way as the former Prime Minister did. We will still, nevertheless, try. Black Bess and Mangrove has been identified, and we will do the relevant site visits before we embark on any additions in that particular area. The point that he made with respect to the tenants is a very valid point. We have had a number of situations. As a matter of fact, there is a very serious one in Bush Hall, in the Prime Minister's constituency, and in an area that is unfit for human habitation. And I think that a number of landlords have been taking advantage of the fact that we do not have the relevant rent restriction and landlord and tenant regulations. And certainly it is something that we have to work on. The legal team in the Ministry of Housing, they are working together with the Attorney General's Department on the relevant amendments. The member for St. Thomas did indicate that she has not got any land in her constituency, but this is not really true. You know, when you get it in here, you should speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And Farmers is in St. Thomas, and farmers is in St. Thomas.
In the chamber, it's farmers, sir. It's his domain, where the people from White Hill have been relocated due to the unstable environment, and they vote for him, sir, resoundingly. So that is St. Thomas, but voting in St. Andrew, as would proud voting in St. Joseph. Your Honor, sir. Help me out now. Small talk.
You know, as they say, case closed. The member for Christchurch East Central did indicate, although I couldn't understand exactly.
West Central.
St. Michael Christchurch, sorry. Christchurch East Central. Although I didn't know exactly.
Christchurch, West Central, I remember.
West Central,
West
yeah,
Central,
sorry, West Central. That in planning our housing, that we should make sure that we take into consideration the water courses. Anybody listening to him would be of the impression that we don't have town planning legislation. But we do take into consideration the water courses. What has happened is people sometimes, they build, especially in the country areas, they actually build in the water course. And this is a serious problem. I think the honourable member for St. Thomas, she answered what he did say with respect to government putting aside a set of houses for disaster purposes in cases where there are hurricanes. But we do that. What has happened is, as she quite rightfully said, is that during the last administration utilized all of those houses and also gave away the units, as I alluded to before. I would like to assure the member for St. Michael East that the question of squatting, squatting is something that you cannot obliterate totally. It's like poverty. I mean, you can't obliterate poverty totally, but we are making an effort to ensure that the areas of squatting that we have in Barbados at this particular point in time, that we will arrest that squatting and certainly provide security of tenure to certain worthy individuals who have been on those sites for a length of time. I did mention Rock Hall, and certainly with respect to the Bell and Licorice Village, we will try our best to ensure.
There's also Bellevue, I remember.
Bellevue, I wasn't aware of the fact that you remember
Bellevue.
that the member for St. Michael Central encouraged his constituents to
No,
squat.
it's just that it's Bellevue,
So my
sir.
apologies
So please
for
don't
that
forget
omission.
Bellevue.
Bellevue. I did listen a little passionately to the member for St. Michael South, one of my constituents, and you know, here again, it is our policy to make sure that we eradicate pit toilets totally. I believe that this is one that we could eradicate totally. Almost all members in this house have some experience of pit toilets, whether it is through their early years or whether it is through their parents. And we are making every effort to ensure that within the next 5 years that the pit toilets are eradicated from the entire landscape of Barbados. I'm particularly pleased that the member for St. Michael West Central spoke in this debate, echoing the sentiments of the member for St. Michael North with respect to mortgage financing. In the past, we had the Housing Credit Fund, the Housing Credit Fund, the Barbados Mortgage Finance. We had the bond issue and those other agencies which supported the 100% mortgages. And I believe that as the chairman of the National Insurance Board, he should not be surprised if we come to that institution, especially saying that there's a resolution here where they're coming out in support of the Barbados for a building for the Barbados Fire Service, that they would be able to do a similar thing for housing in Barbados. With respect to the concerns by the member for St. Michael, the leader of the House, with respect to the title deeds for the 20-year program, we have had some stumbling blocks. All caused by not only the actions of the last government of which I spoke, but the fact that they have introduced legislation which has made it extremely difficult to do the conveyances with the speed that should be done. There's an amendment which is coming very shortly, which would in no way affect persons from having a proper structure. Those persons who government is compelled under the Act to convey to. But what we will be doing is, in that amendment, we will be indicating that houses which have been constructed for over 50 years will not be affected by that provision in the legislation. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that most of the concerns, there are some which are repetitive, have been answered in both in my presentation and in the comments from members of the other side. And in those circumstances, I beg to move that this resolution do now pass.
The question is that this resolution be now passed. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution now stands passed.
Middle, sir, of government notices.
Honourable Leader, government business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225, the lease to the National Insurance Board of a parcel of land, the property of the Crown, situated at Pine Plantation Road in the parish of St. Michael in this island, to be used for the construction of a new headquarters for the Barbados Fire Service. Also, a resolution to approve A, the change of the public purpose of the compulsory acquisition under the Land Acquisition Act, Cap 228, of a parcel of land, the property of the Crown, situated at Maxwell in the parish of Christchurch, dated December 28, 2001, for the provision of beach access and public parking facilities to that of tourism development and public parking. And B, the lease in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225, to Mahogany Park, Inc., of the said parcel of land for the public purpose of tourism development and public parking. Suspend. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the sitting for 10 minutes. 6:30?
The question is this honourable chamber stands suspended
Sorry, 6:35.
until 6:35 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 6:35 p.m.
We have, no, just those two that I just, you don't have the other two.